Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Davey Deathray here, and we're live tonight. We're going to talk some Halloween news and just kind of have a hangout and a chat. I see, looks like Mitch is out there in the chat. What's happening, Mitch? I already like what you're contributing here. Michael wasn't trying to kill Laurie in 78. Yeah, did you see the Sinister Cinema? I think he did a whole video on like he thinks that Michael's target was Annie because she's the one that shouted at him when he was driving the car about speed kills and all that, and that Laurie just kind of, got caught up in it because she happened to find the bodies, and once you're in Michael's line of sight, you're just going to be collateral damage, as it were. So I think that's kind of an interesting theory there. So yeah, a really cool way to think about that. Hey, what's up, Danny? How are you doing? Good to see you in the chat. Let's see here. Can you guys hear me okay? It's telling me that my audio bit rate is lower than the recommended bit rate. Can you guys hear me? You guys not getting any audio there? Check, check. It seems like the audio is going through, so I just want to make sure. I should have like some background music while I'm doing the thing. Okay, I can just keep track of the chat here. Doing good thing. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Davey Deathray here, and we're live. I gotta mute that. All right, there we go. Perfect, guys. Excellent. Glad you can hear me. That's good to know. All right, so I am not too enthused on the Halloween news. I think there's a cool way to do a TV show, even a good way to reboot Michael. I just don't know if rebooting Michael through television is the right way to go. So, especially when I saw that they were just going to go back to the original idea, didn't really do much for me because we've already seen that a couple times. And, we've already seen sequels retconned and all that kind of stuff too. And I think the big thing is what we keep on finding out time and time again is that you can't outdo the original. There's just something special in the sauce there that just works on a way that none of the other films have worked, even if they each have moments that kind of remind you of the original, or, even if they get really close or something. Yeah, so with the news of going back to the original story, now they didn't give too many details, so I do want to kind of take a look at that with you guys and just kind of go through it together. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what they posted over here on Bloody Disgusting. Now, everyone's been covering this. I watched, Dave put out a couple videos, Dave McCrae. Love his stuff, so I'm always checking that out. But yeah, essentially what they're doing here is a creative reset completely and going back to the original film as opposed to spinning out of any of the more recent film adaptations. So, the foundation is the original film, the John Carpenter classic, and the characters of that film, and maybe a group of characters that we haven't really focused on that much. So it could be, like Dave had said in his second video, that maybe they're going back to either right before the original film, or maybe it's going to go alongside the original film. I think even if it is before or during or after, I don't really see the point in doing that for a TV show for a few reasons. I don't think that if there are people out there that are not keen on Halloween, or they haven't been watching it, or they're not caught up at this point, they have plenty of material that they can go through and catch up on the mythos and the whole choose your own adventure kind of thing with Michael. But I don't think they're very likely to go to a brand new TV show that's rebooting a character that they know nothing about. I don't see why they would do that. When they did Bates Motel, I felt like half of the story had nothing to do with Norman Bates. I stopped watching that show, I think, after the second season, because half of it was about like a weed farm, and it seems like a lot of these dramas nowadays, like television dramas, like half of the story has nothing to do with the main plot line. It's just there to create unnecessary drama to kind of keep you hooked and keep you watching episode after episode. So this whole idea of going back to the well and rebooting Michael for a TV show, I don't like it. Now, if you're going to reboot Michael and you want to do that in a film, I think that's a different story. And if you watched my previous video here on the channel, it covers an animatic pitch from back in 2012. And it's a really good pitch for a reboot of the Halloween story because you jump right into the action. The very first scene is Smith's Grove is burning down in flames. 2 police officers are on their way. There's no other emergency services there, so they show up. The building's on fire. People are running out. People are still stuck upstairs. And people start seeing a shadowy figure and throwing themselves out of the window. So the police officers decide to go in. They put on the gas masks. We get like the POV, really cool point of view, akin to the original, but now instead of being little kid Michael, it's these police officers. And Michael ends up dispatching both of them at the end and walking through the flames. And, you know, it cuts to black from there. And I think that's an awesome way to, you know, you don't need the backstory. You don't even need to show him as a kid. Anyone who knows that about him. It's kind of like Dracula at this point where you don't really need an origin story per se. But I think if you're going to reboot and you want to go back to Michael, you should keep Michael in the films. What I would like to see as far as the TV show goes is I would really like to see an anthology TV show. So I talked about this last fall on the horror show channel with Cecil. We talked about once the news dropped and we figured out who was getting the rights to Halloween for TV and film, we just kind of had a chat and went over what we thought it all might be. And that my pitch at that point, it was really simple. It was just do an anthology show, call it like Halloween Legacy or Haddonfield Legacy or something like that. And, you know, Halloween has all these choose your own adventures. It has all of these loose ends and dead ends that you can go either kind of retcon something and finish one of the stories the way that you want to, or you could do a tried and true sequel to one of the loose ends. For example, so, you know, Dwight Little just came out about a month ago and was talking about doing something called Halloween 4 Part 2 and bringing Danielle Harris back into the franchise. And now, you know, it's been close to 40 years since that movie, right? That was 88 when H4 came out. So, you know, it would be really cool to do a Halloween 4 Part 2. You could do it as a TV show. And even just one season, that's the cool thing is, so if you do Halloween Legacy, each season can be its own contained story. You could do 4 episodes, you could do 6 episodes. They could kind of be like a mini series sort of setup where you have like half-hour episodes and you're able to tell these bigger stories, but they're kind of like everything's tied up within the story. By the time the season is over, boom, you just move on to the next one. So you could do the Halloween 4 Part 2. We could do something with Season of the Witch that's either a reboot, a retelling. Maybe you spend the first couple episodes kind of remaking the original to get people just, you know, up to date on the story and then take it further from there. You could do a season that follows Curse of Michael Myers. You could do a season that follows H2O and goes with the idea that Michael was killed and maybe there's a copycat killer. You could even bring Rob Zombie back and have him do a season that would be a follow-up to his Halloween 2, which I actually really like his Halloween 2. I know I'm in the minority there, and a lot of people don't really enjoy that movie very much, but if you look at my Halloween rankings on a Letterboxd there, you'll find out that I kind of reward the movies that take chances and do things differently. So I'm one of those people that liked Halloween Ends. You know, it's not my favorite in the franchise or anything, and it certainly has issues as far as, you know, not much Michael or anything, but I do think it's a beautifully shot, very well acted film, and I think that if you brought Corey into the mix earlier on, it would have made more sense. But anyways, you could follow up even something after that, you know, so let me bring out my notes here before I get lost in all the talking. And let me jump into the chat here, too, and make sure that I'm saying what's up to everyone. So we've got, oh, look at that. My wife, Kate, is in the chat. What's happening, Kate? 42 set hike. Doing great. Thank you so much for coming in and liking the stream. Hey, Matt Facci, what's happening? Facci Cinema in the house. Go visit his channel. Check out his content. I really dig the way he goes about things. It's a little different. So if you're looking for somebody to follow that covers horror news and horror topics and is not just going through the same kind of thing, Matt's a great person to follow there. We just did an interview this week. It was really cool. Got to know him a little bit better, and he had some people jumping in the chat, so that was fun too. And I see Allie is in there. What's happening, Allie girl? Let's see here. That's a good. Yeah, you liked the pitch animatic. Yeah, so that video has been just like haunting me since I first watched it. If you guys haven't seen the animatic, check out my video from earlier this week, or there's a link in that video's description where you can just watch the animatic itself. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. I think it's pretty awesome, and something that I think would just be, like I said, just a really good way to bring Michael back. It kind of gives him a fresh start. So yeah, a couple things I do want to say here. I want to cover my bases. Do I think that rebooting Halloween from the very beginning on television could work? I think it is possible it could work. So I know I kind of shat all over it at the beginning. Of course, anything's possible if it's well written and they find a nice seam to climb into that works for television. I do think it's possible. I just think it would be very difficult to go all the way back to the original and have it be something that's interesting. So yeah, it's one of those things here. Let me switch it back over here. I forgot that I was over on the other screen there for a second. So yeah, it is possible to go all the way back to the original and find, something that works, but I think it would be very difficult. And, like I said, we've already learned that you can't top the original. So I'm just sort of left asking, like, who is this show for? Like, the show that goes back to the original and either reboots it or tells it from that timeline again, who is it for? Because it's not for the fans. Because we've already seen that. And I think if you really want to do something that's for the fans, you go the anthology route. So, yeah, the ideas that I have here are the Season of the Witch, the Halloween 4 Part 2. There was an original pitch and story for Halloween 2 before they filmed the version in the hospital. There was going to be a version where Laurie I think she's in college and she's living in a high-rise apartment in like Chicago or in some big city, and Michael finds her there. So you could do you could launch from the original and do something totally different as a sequel. I think that's the really cool thing about, the Halloween series. If we go over to our cool little choose your own adventure put together by the oldpalmarcus.com folks. So yeah, you could, with the way they're going to do this TV show, they're going to start from Halloween 78 or somewhere in there. But you could certainly go after Season of the Witch. You could pick up, you could even do another sequel in between Halloween 2 and Halloween 4 that's like an actual Michael Myers sequel that could fit in there. And I think the really cool thing about this is just having each season be a contained story. And, I admit that it is riskier, and you're making it would be a niche show for people that are just fans and want to see those what if scenarios and those loose ends tied up. But, it's something that we're kind of seeing in fan films, like with what Braden Timmons is putting together with The Last Nightmare to follow up the Haddonfield Nightmare. That's a sequel to H2O. So you could even go that route and bring Josh Hartnett back and do a sequel to H2O. I think, why should Jamie Lee Curtis be the only star from the franchise that gets to keep on coming back? Like, why don't we bring Danielle back for her H4 Part 2 and bring Josh Hartnett back for a follow-up to H2O? It could be really interesting. You could even do an animated season. You could go in so many creative directions, and the cool thing about that is it could last a good long while. And I think the way to do it, So we have the 50th anniversary coming up for Halloween in 4 years, in 2028, and it'll be the 40th for H4. So what I think they should do is try to line it up to where maybe like, 4 to 6 months before that anniversary celebration, they put out the TV show. And then, a few months down the line, they announce the movie, and the movie comes like that following year. Or maybe you put the TV show out year 49, and then you drop the film on year 50. And the film could be a reboot of Michael. These things can run congruently, and I think the best way to have them run congruently is to not worry about them ever having to mix. So you just have the TV show be its own thing where each story is its own contained story, and then you have a film series that either reboots or continues on. So that would be the route that I would like to see them go, and it doesn't look like that's what they're going to do, which is why my thumbnail didn't look too pleased there. I just think it's sort of like, this is about as basic of an idea as you could get. Like, maybe they'll surprise me and they'll do something creative with it. I don't see it happening. I want to be more optimistic. I don't want to be the kind of person that's just going to be, bummed out and talking negative about things. But even with all the issues that an anthology series could have, as far as maybe not being as financially bankable as, just going right into a continuation of an early Michael story, I think about, the fans and what the fans would like to see. And I know that I would like to see these what if scenarios, these things that could be almost like a comic book story, like what we got with Freddy versus Jason versus Ash. And, you see that in comics where they do these like one-offs. I think Mallrats even had a sequel in comic book form, being able to do something like that with a streaming television show. I think that maybe that's one of the big things that streaming television is missing, or at least like I don't watch a lot of streaming television because I don't want these big drawn out stories and these like 45-minute episodes where the first 10 minutes is exciting and the first 5 minutes or last 5 minutes is exciting and everything in the middle is just totally filler and like nonsense. Like, I felt like The Walking Dead, it just got to the point where I'm like, all right, I only need to watch the beginning of the episode and the end of the episode because the rest of the episode is just people bitching about the dumbest shit. And it's not the only show that does that. So that's why I think 4 to 6 episodes a season, each season is its own story, and you get to bring back all of these legacy characters and performers. You just get to bring them on back, and then you tell that story, and when you're done, you're done. You don't have to spend a whole bunch of money on a film that might not work out, Exorcist believer, and you don't have to do 3 movies that might divide the fan base, like David Gordon Green's Halloween movies, which I really like, but I totally understand why people are lukewarm about the whole thing or really don't like certain entries in that trilogy. I happen to really like it, but I like when these franchises do something different. So, and you could always bring in guest directors and have some really, really cool shit. Like I was saying, you could bring Rob Zombie in. Tarantino was, I don't know if he ever got to the point where he, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat if you guys know, I don't know if he ever got to write. I think he was brought in for like Curse of Michael Myers, maybe before it was called that, when they were just kind of like, they were looking for ideas for a new Halloween movie. And I don't think anything that he ever wrote got used in any of the pictures, but how cool would it be to have somebody like Tarantino come in and do a 4 to 6 episode Halloween just contained story where he gets to go do his own weird thing. Like, I wouldn't even need to pitch him an idea. I would just want to know what the hell he would like to do and then just let a guy like him run with it. So, and then, all the regular names that people bring up that they want to see do Halloween movies, like you could bring Mike Flanagan in the mix, right? You could bring in, is it Robert Eggers that did The Witch and The Lighthouse? I think those creative minds should be able to make their own films that are based on their own ideas, but it would be great to bring them in and have them do like a mini series. So I want a sip of water and then see what you guys are saying in the chat, because It's really cool to see people in here. Didn't know. You never know when you go live and you don't even have 400 subs. You don't know if anyone's going to show up. So it's really cool. I appreciate that, guys. So Fatchy says, Davey, you sexy stud. What's going on? Oh, I saw that earlier. I guess I just didn't read it. Mitch says, after the original, the sequels are various mixtures of 1 and 2. Good ideas. Oh, 3 more bad ideas. I'm in it for the money and fuck it, it's fine print. Yeah, you know, the sequels, the Halloween sequels totally run the full spectrum, but it's not unique for a slasher series that ends up going that long, right? It's like, you can't take it personally because some series like Hellraiser or Leprechaun or Nightmare on Elm Street, they got off the rails way earlier than maybe even I think Halloween got off the rails. And it's okay. I think sometimes it's like the seasons, right? You know, like you need winter and you need like the death so you can have the rebirth. So, you know, these studios get a little too greedy, like when they did Halloween 4 and then Halloween 5 was released like exactly a year later. So they just rush to production and then they take like 5 or 6 years to put together Curse. So it's this really weird, inconsistent, like sometimes you're rushing and making these bad decisions. Other times you're taking 6 years and you still couldn't figure it out. So, you know, it's those low points and the ebbs and flows that help us appreciate maybe, you know, some of the other sequels when we go back, you know, when we look at them in retrospect. That's why I think that, you know, movies like Kills and even Halloween Ends, you know, maybe people won't come around completely on them, but imagine 15 to 20 years down the road and a whole new generation of people are watching these movies that didn't have those expectations, or maybe they heard that Ends was different. Like before I went and saw Ends, I knew it was going to be different because I think it was like Entertainment Weekly had an interview with David Gordon Green, and he specifically stated that there was going to be a main character called Corey Cunningham that was going to play a huge part in the story. So, you know, he didn't spoil anything too much further than that, but I kind of knew what was going on. So I wasn't too taken aback and I was along for the ride. So maybe some feelings will come around, or at least people will slightly warm up to them. But yeah, you're always going to have some people that just hate some of those sequels. I've kind of come around on some of them, because I always try to put it like, it's just put it in perspective, you know, how do they relate to one another? Like I was saying when Matt and I were on our interview, or, you know, our chat on Wednesday, you know, I was saying the Friday the 13th is kind of my go-to franchise. It's not my favorite franchise, but it's my go-to because the movies are just so easy to watch. Like even the ones I don't think are that great, I can just put on in the background. Whereas I'm a little more emotionally attached to Halloween. So some of like the lesser sequels, like I'm not really a big fan of Halloween 5. It just it's boring to me. But I've certainly come around a little bit on Curse, especially the producer's cut. I wish there were certain things from the theatrical cut that made its way into the producer's cut, but I think the producer's cut has more of a fall atmosphere. It has slower tracking shots. There's a whole... I mean, really, it's probably just 15 or 20 seconds, but it's Kara walking around the university where there's the slow, deliberate camera movement, similar to what happens when she goes home later in the film. And it really it reminds me of the original film. Like at those moments, I'm like, oh, she's like Laurie walking home from school in the original film. So, you know, I really like those aspects. I think George P. Wilbur looks awesome in Curse. I like the mask. I don't even mind that he's a little bit more rotund. I think he looks so much better than how he looks in Halloween 4. And man, if they just kept the bandaged look from Halloween 4 when he's in the auto shop, that would have just made the movie... It would have automatically put it probably in my top 5. But it's kind of just like a reboot remake. Let's see what else we got going on here in the chat. So Danny says they've done a lot of that in the comics. So Danny, so what have I missed then in the comics? Have they done sequels to all of these? They've already tied up these loose ends. Is my idea just like kind of old and I'm missing out? That may be the case. Mitch says, I still want to see Jamie Lloyd and John Tate meet in a support group for survivors. So there you go. That's something you could do Halloween 4 Part 2, and then you could do an H2O follow-up that has John in there, and then you could do a season after that where they do meet up. Or maybe they meet up at the somewhere in John's story, and maybe it turns to something, maybe it doesn't. You can kind of, like when they're talking about making a Halloween cinematic universe, I think you're kind of onto something there, Mitch. I think that's the way you do that sort of thing. They meet in a support group for survivors, figure out their siblings, and vent about what a bad mother Lori was. Yeah, Lord, this alcoholic, pill-popping mom. And then you could even throw, you know, we could bring Karen into the mix, right? And yeah, at least she taught Karen how to do something, you know. Like Jamie, she just bails on, and then, you know, John, man, H2O, I dislike it, I think, more and more as the years go on, but I really love that first act of H2O. Like, all the setup, I love I think the exploration of Laurie's character is a little more believable in that first act than it is in Halloween 2018. I really like, you know, I think Josh Hartnett brings some pretty good chops in the first act, especially for, you know, he wasn't an established star yet. He was just getting going. Adam Arkin, Alan Arkin's son, as Laurie Tate's boyfriend, like, that guy is super charming. He's not in the movie enough. I really wish there were some more kills in that movie so they didn't have to kill him, but it is a good homage kill to the nurse death from H2, so that's kind of cool. Let me just kind of catch up here. Allie's watching the star. How are your stars doing tonight, Allie? Are they playoff bound, or are they still fighting to get in? I would imagine they've got to have a spot in there. It's been a while since I've checked. All right. Danny agrees with Mitch. She would love to see Danielle and John get back together, or Jamie and John, I guess it would be. Yeah, Allie, you're struggling to finish The Walking Dead. Man, I don't. TV, for the most part, kind of bores the hell out of me. It drags on too long, because the problem with television is they're trying to get you to watch the next episode, and then with like the season finales and mid-season finales, they're just trying to get you to come back for the rest. So they don't have to do too much in the middle. They have to keep it just interesting enough, and the kind of show that you can talk to your coworkers about, instead of like just good entertainment. And I understand, like, I get that, like, the way that I think about like entertainment and art that is meant to entertain is totally different than the mainstream. I'm not saying that my idea would be more lucrative or like would be better for every single person sitting down in front of their television. But I do think my idea would be better for the Halloween fans, and maybe even the horror fans that are kind of lukewarm on Halloween. You know, people that are more like Fred heads, or I don't know what people are called that are Jason Voorhees fanatics. Maybe one of you guys can let me know. And then Coy, Happy Sanjo is in the chat, or at least he was. Oh, no, looks like he still is there. What's happening, Coy? Good to see you, bud. I have 0% in revisiting old elements from the 0% interest. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Coy. That's like the last thing that I want to see, is going back to the original again. Yeah, I don't get it. Mitch says there is a way to relaunch Halloween as a franchise and make it work. I plan to detail that on my own stream. Sweet. Mitch, let me know. I'd love to tune into that stream and see what you got. Alley Girl says, it's me, I'm the problem. Love kills. To me, that's where Halloween ended, with Michael staring out of the window. Yeah, it wouldn't have been a bad ending. Honestly, I think they got the hitch in their step was making that time jump from in kills to ends. Like, I think ends probably should have just continued from that night, where they really do put him down. Or yeah, like you're saying, maybe that ending where they meet him in the street and beat his ass, like, save that for the last movie and then put something else in between, you know, the third act or the end of the second act of Kills and where you want to place Ends. Or I want to put a show out on the channel. Let me know. Let me know in the chat if you guys are interested in this kind of idea. They do that, like How It Should Have Ended, I think is a series on YouTube. But I was thinking of something called How to Make It Better, where I go to movies, maybe even movies that I enjoy, and work in little tweaks of how I think that the story could be served a little bit better, just as a fan and as somebody that has a writing background. I'd love to do something like that. I would think, Halloween 2018, I would have put Corey in that movie, and he wouldn't be a main character. I would have Corey, because you get the idea in Ends that he's a smart kid, but he doesn't come from the wealthiest family, so he needs to work and save up money for college, right? So, but he's a smart kid. So in Halloween 2018, you put Corey in the National Honor Society with Allison. So, and then maybe even you have this thing where Cameron has kind of bullied and picked on Corey ever since they were little kids. And he doesn't like the idea of this kid that he's been giving shit to his whole life, having a study buddy or, study dates with his girlfriend, right? But Allison and Corey have some sort of connection. Corey is like a little meager and a little quiet. And maybe that's all we really see of him in 2018, and he doesn't even need to show up in Kills. But then that way, if you do the time jump in Ends and you bring him in that first scene, we're like, oh my gosh, there's that guy. This will be interesting to see like how he weaves back into the story. I think that's just one little change that could make that better. Another idea I had is, I think Tommy should have been running for like public office. Maybe Tommy is already a city councilman and he's running for mayor of Haddonfield. And so in 2018, we see election posters because Halloween is right before election season, right? It's like a week before most people vote. So all you see in Halloween 2018 are election posters for, Tommy Doyle as mayor. And then in Kills, you still have him out at the bar with Lonnie and everyone else, and maybe he's sort of got that RFK Jr. relaxed politician look where he's got the sleeves rolled up, but he's still wearing his tie. He doesn't have a jacket on. So he's unwinding with his friends and everything at the bar, and it gives him more motivation, right, to sort of try to get involved and show Haddonfield that he can be a leader and that he can protect the city as a mayor as well, because he can jump in and not only put an end to what Michael's been putting the city through, but also, bring some calm to the people of Haddonfield. And then that would make the stakes would be higher for him to actually deliver on that. And that would make his failure even more heartbreaking, and maybe even have another kind of sociological sort of spin on things, right? Where I think a lot of times we look to politicians to solve our problems. We want to elect you, put you into office. Mitch, I know that you don't feel this way, but I think a lot of the voting public is like, oh, if I vote for this person, they'll take care of this issue. And at least, people like me will have things the way that we need them. So I think it would sort of play into, you could have a message there that could come off a lot more subtly than Evil Dies Tonight, and a lot more subtly than Tommy like repeating half of his lines. For some reason in that movie, he does a lot of like immediate line repetition. But Allie, I agree with you. Kills has such a great, I do love Kills. Take out all the weird stuff with Tivoli and the Evil Dies Tonight, a few minutes of the cringy dialogue. Oh my gosh, is that Darren from the Slaughtered Lamb Movie Podcast? Holy crap. All right, now I'm sweating because the big dogs are in the chat now. But yeah, Kills has such a cool vibe for the most part. I just, it seems like with the David Gordon Green trilogy, most people have things they like about it and things that really sort of threw them for a spin. So it's kind of like if those things work for you, great. If they don't, it's kind of a bummer. Each one of those movies to me has its pluses and its minuses. If I had to rank them, I would probably go 2018 Kills, or no, 2018, I don't know, 2018 Ends Kills. It's a tough one. It kind of changes every time I watch them too. I'm the kind of guy that watches, like, I'll rewatch and rewatch a movie, and it sort of is different, you know, every time I watch it. I pick up something else or feel a little bit differently about it. You know, Darren, I am a young Dave McRae. I'm only 3 years younger than him, though. We're pretty close. I'm probably, I would imagine I'm much younger than you, although it's tough for me to get an idea from watching your show how old you and Frank are. But I would imagine Frank is probably a little bit younger than you as well. But I have the feeling that you hide your age really well because you look like you know, a young dude for sure. Mitch says the bandage look was awesome. If the hair started to come through more as the film progressed, so it looks more like the mask by the end. Okay, yeah, exactly. Or it gets like dirtier. That's such a missed opportunity because that mask in H4 is dreadful. It is a huge hindrance to that movie. And if you check out my rankings, or if I ever put together a video where I rank the Halloween franchise, like the portrayal of Michael is huge for me. So if you don't get Michael's portrayal right, I'm not going to enjoy the movie nearly as much. And considering that Halloween 4 is pretty much a soft reboot with a dreadful mask, it kind of slipped in my ranking because of that. Danny says there have been quite a few requels in like the books. So Danny, tell me a little bit about Night Dance, or shoot me a DM or something, or where I can read about that. I'd love to check that out. So if you guys, do you guys have ideas for what you would want to see in a Halloween TV show? Like if they're going to do these things simultaneously, Darren, I know you're probably going to talk about this tomorrow. I'll jump on that stream at 11 a.m. AZ time to see what you guys think. But if anyone else wants to share, like if they have an idea for what they'd like to see, you know, people all the time in Dave's streams and everything, people talk about Charlie Bowles. Like they want to see other eerie, evil stories from that area. So you could also go that route where kind of that whole thing, the whole vibe from Kills and Ends, that it's almost like Haddonfield is this place that just breeds this ugliness, this evil. So you could have a show just called like Haddonfield, that each season is kind of about some evil shit or the spirit going from one person to another. Yeah, let's just get that conversation going. If you're watching this after the fact, I am a young Dave McRae, no. But jump in the comments and let me know. And hey, you know, I am still so new at all of this and don't have many subs. So if you guys aren't subbed yet and you don't mind throwing me one of those, that would be great. And liking the stream could probably help get some other folks to see it. So feel free to share and all that stuff. They say you can see the influences of your heroes when you create your art. Yeah. Are you guys talking about the Dave McRae kind of thing? It's tough. You know, I've been watching Dave since it must have been 2017 when he started posting about the David Gordon Green trilogy. Or I guess it was at that time, it was just the very first movie. So that's when I first got into Dave. And right away, you know, I was like, man, this guy really knows his stuff. Like, and then, you know, a few videos in, I learned that he was in the industry, which totally makes sense. And Dave is, you know, maybe at this stage, I'm a little more like flippant about like, no, I don't think this idea is good. And here's why I think my anthology idea is great. But I think Dave is like really well measured as far as like, he thinks of it from all different angles, right? So it's like, he's sitting there thinking, how are they going to make a profit off of this? And I guess if you're thinking, if that's the only concern, then maybe going back to the original is the right idea. But again, I do have to mention, who is this for? Because I don't think you're going to get a bunch of people that are like, I don't care about Michael Myers and I'm not into horror. They're not going to go, oh, there's a TV show about Michael Myers? Well, maybe I'll get into it and learn about him. Like, I don't see that happening. All right, Allie likes the idea of doing the how to make it better. Oh, and Darren is 50. So you're about, I have an older brother that works in in Hollywood. He was out at well, he lives out here in AZ, but when I say works in Hollywood, he does 3D matte paintings on films. He actually worked on Never Hike Alone 2, and he's worked on big stuff like Avatar. Shutter Island was one of his first big movies. He's worked on some of the Avengers films, works on a bunch of TV and stuff. So he was out there at age 45 with me. And yeah, he was born in 73, so he's just a touch older than you. But we bond over, man, when I was growing up, it was my brother Matt who showed me movies like Alien and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and got me into music that was well before my time. So even though I was born in 82, I feel totally blessed to have 4 older siblings, because I feel like I absorbed so much more from the 80s and like the pop culture because I had older siblings. And I'm sure I've mentioned this before, Darren, but I grew up in Southeast Alaska, so I also know what it's like to grow up in a temperate, foggy, rainy, kind of gloomy area. I'm sure I know there are beautiful days in Southeast Alaska. I have no doubt there are many gorgeous days in in England, and I'd imagine you're somewhere near London and an area around there. But yeah, overall, a similar latitude. I think it's latitude 58 is where Juneau is. Allie says, that is why 2018 and Kills are good in my opinion, is James Jude Courtney. Yeah, that's something they really got right, was casting Michael. They did not screw that up one bit. Nick Castle is my favorite just because of the way he moves, which I think is one of those, it's an interesting thing, right? You figure you can just put a guy in a suit and they'll just figure it out, but it's sort of like a dancer. Like they need to have a certain, a certain kind of like movement to them. I think that's one of the reasons why there are so many people that are adamant about not having anyone but Robert Englund play Freddy Krueger, because he played him for so long. All those mannerisms, like the little like side pose with the glove, like I think he was saying that was inspired by like Fosse, inspired by dancing, and even like with Jason, everyone does have their favorite Jasons, of course, but when it comes to me, it's like I really like the is it Ted White from Final Chapter? I love just his presence and a little bit of the grunting, a little bit like moving more like a real person. And I mean, Jason Lives is my favorite Friday the 13th movie, but Ted White might be my favorite Jason, if that makes any sense. I don't know. But yeah, James Jude Courtney is amazing as Michael, especially I think the reason why 2018 just doesn't really waver in my rankings amongst the new ones is I do think it really does nail that look and feel of the original, probably better than any of the other films in the franchise. Of course, everyone talks about the tracking shot. The tracking shot is great. I really like that moment where he looks in the mirror, through the window into the woman's house, and you can see that reflection of him. And it's got this strange, it's so weird to me because the reflection looks like a totally different mask than the mask he's wearing. So it's kind of like that old adage from the original film where it's like the whole idea of the mask is it would look different no matter what kind of lighting you put on it. So every time, depending on where the light is, the mask is going to look different, which is one of the reasons why it is, so unnerving, that whole uncanny valley. And then that giant shadow that he has on the other house when he walks between the houses. I know it's just some big old like Batman light, like shooting, in front of him. But as far as like looking good on film in cinema, I think it's great. And it just gives me the feel of the original. Love James Jude Courtney. Mitch says, Kills missed the opportunity to have William Shatner as a retired criminologist turned indie documentary filmmaker. Yeah, I don't know if he would be like, I heard something that is he sour on never getting like money or residuals for that. Is that one of the reasons why they had to go away from that mask? I have no idea, but if you worked him in some way, as long as it's, as Dave would say, as long as it's properly motivated, right? And the mood, atmosphere. Yep. Yeah, I actually think another thing they could have done in 2018 is just let Aaron live. Like, bring Aaron back in Ends, and we're like, we can't believe he's alive, right? So maybe he's walking with a cane. He's not quite right. Obviously, he was like bludgeoned terribly in the head, but he could sort of be like the harbinger / Loomis of Halloween Ends. And, like Laurie is all reformed and back to her old self in Ends. And Aaron could be like, it's not over. Like, the madness isn't over or whatever. And everyone just thinks, oh, you're crazy because you got bonked on the head too hard. But I feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity bringing him back. I think that was like one thing they didn't do in that trilogy that they could have done is weave a little bit more. Put Corey in 2018, bring Aaron back, just a few more things that are threads that are tied together, sewn together a little bit better. Yeah, and Mitch, you would have to play that straight, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to bring Shatner into it, he wouldn't be able to do what he did in Loaded Weapon 1, which I absolutely adore. And speaking of which, my wife and I just watched Lethal Weapon last night, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to watch Loaded Weapon 1. And Darren, I know you're a big Loaded Weapon fan, so let's see here. Dave McCrow is absolutely correct when he says that the audience should never see Michael's process. Yeah, I think that Michael's one of those slashers that works better in mystery. Bathe him in mystique. I don't want to know, like, anything, really. And that's a reason why I think the anthology series for television could work really well. Because it doesn't really hinge on knowing anything else about Michael. It's just a little peek into an otherworld kind of what-if scenario. So we're actually learning more about the characters in that story. Michael is just like the constant. Everything else is the variable. So we don't need, a constant doesn't need to change. So keep Michael the way he is, right? Kate says Loaded Weapon tonight. All right. I love the, let's see here. What's the line where Tim Curry is like, in a little while, you will beg for mercy. And Whoopi Goldberg goes, no, I'll beg now. Love that shit. All right. Darren says, you're a natural, Davey. You'll boss the horror space soon. Oh my gosh, no. There's plenty of room for everyone. I just want to be part of it, that's all. Great to meet you. Good to see you doing the stream tonight. Thank you so much for coming by, Darren. I look forward to hopping on your stream tomorrow at 11 a.m. If you guys haven't set the notification bell on that one, you're going to want to see what Frank and Darren have to say. I think that's like one thing that I really want to incorporate into my channel. I thank you so much for the sweet words, Darren. But I would like to find, maybe somebody that's in a similar spot as I am, like up and coming, still trying to find like their own space. I don't want to just like glom onto somebody that has a bunch of subs and like, just because they have a bunch of subs and do a show with them. I mean, if that opportunity arises, that would be awesome. But I think it would be really cool, to do something with another person and have that back and forth and have a discussion that's, I love chatting with you guys or, jumping into the chat and everything, but just to kind of get the conversation going on a totally different level. I think you can see it with Frank and Darren. You can see it with We Watched a Movie. When Dave and Tony do their Two Dudes and Some Bullshit, it's just sort of like, the one person pushes the other person, the conversation flows a little easier. And I think that would be a really cool thing to bring to the channel here. I like doing my pre-recorded videos. Those are a little tougher because I'm really hard on myself and I do a lot of takes to make sure that I'm speaking clearly and all that kind of good stuff. But I'm thinking about making like a Saturday night like that. I wouldn't leave that in a video. I would cut that out. I would yell the F word at myself and reshoot it and edit it in there. But I'm thinking about every Saturday doing a stream. So I would just jump in live and we could talk about, I mean, really, we could just kind of chit chat and catch up and see what everyone wants to talk about. Or when news drops like this, we can cover the news. And unfortunately, I'm not too pumped on the news as far as Miramax taking over Halloween, or at least on the television idea. Allie says, I love Lethal Weapon. I wanted to grow up and live in an RV by the ocean when I was little. Yeah, and it's funny because that movie, like Kate and I are like, oh, we should put on something that's like action-y, but also like kind of funny. And as we're watching it, I'm like, I think it's the sequels that get a little funnier because the first movie is kind of grim. I mean, Riggs really is, by the end of the movie, he's a changed man. So it's an awesome story arc or character arc for that character. And Murtaugh has a really nice arc too. I think they do a really great job telling that story. But as we're watching it, I'm like, like when he's sitting there, like with the gun, like, drinking and looking at a picture of his wife and thinking about killing himself. It's just like, oh, wow, this movie is real funny, huh? Ugh, gosh. But what a good, it's been a while since I've seen like 3 or 4. But I remember really liking the first 2. So I'd love to finish out the series and see what we think. Jackie Earle Haley was wasted in the A Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. Hard agree, Mitch. Hard agree. I have not come around on that one. I probably turned it off about 15 minutes, 20 minutes in. So maybe now that I'm doing stuff on YouTube, maybe I should go back to it, watch the whole thing, actually put together my thoughts, and give it a chance. But at the time when I tried to watch it, it's just like the Child's Play remake. Same kind of thing. I got like 15 minutes in. RoboCop, that remake. And I was just like, nope, you haven't done anything yet to make me interesting and to like hook me in. So I'm gone because I can just watch the originals. And yeah, I think they got like the realistic route with the look of Freddy. I think that was a bit of a misstep. I understand why you would do it to try something different, and I've already said a handful of times in this stream that I like it when filmmakers try different things, but I think with somebody like Freddy, it would be like completely changing the Jason mask to something else instead of a hockey mask. Or even like what they did in the Scream television show, which I really like that show. But you know how they changed the mask? I think some fans just didn't really like the mask, but I think the whole point of it being a different mask is they want you to know that it has no connection with the film series. But yeah, the look of Freddy was odd. I wasn't enjoying the acting or the look of the film. And I really enjoyed the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake and the 2009 Friday the 13th remake. I mean, for what it is, right? Like, certainly the 2009 Friday the 13th remake could have been better. They could have had better characters. But a lot of the Friday the 13th movies have a lot of throwaway characters that are just like hot people banging and partying and then getting killed. They really like took it to the nth degree in the remake. But since it kind of fits the franchise, it didn't really bug me. I really liked the portrayal of Jason. I thought Derek Mears knocked it out of the park as Jason. The look was really cool, like the tattered, like old shirt and the almost like the duster jacket or whatever he's wearing. It's some like that shot of him when he's like on the roof and he's backlit with that big spotlight on him. Just really cool. Really cool stuff. And Marcus Nispel, who directed the Texas Chainsaw 2003 remake, he did that 2009 Friday the 13th remake. And I really like how he brings just like a brutality and this intensity to his filmmaking. Like you can feel the physicality of it. And so even if everything isn't perfect in the film, enough of that remake worked for me to put it way above like that Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And gosh, I think the Friday the 13th remake is like right in the middle on my ranking. I think it's like 6 or 7 in my Friday the 13th ranking. I really like it a lot. Especially that first scene is just, that's like a pitch in and of itself, right? And I love the idea of Jason being like a spider and Camp Crystal Lake is his web. So he's got those tripwires like that ring bells, and he knows exactly where, like he's popping out of trap doors and stuff to grab people. Just a really cool like character study on Jason. A really great way of getting into his head a little bit more without going. I don't think they went too far. Like it's still basic. He's kind of acting like an animal and a huntsman. I think he uses a different implement of destruction for most every kill, I think, in that movie. And this really cool idea of like that was the last place that he knew like safety and love was when his mother was there at Crystal Lake with him. And so he protects that place, you know, and anyone that comes into that space just sort of sends him into a panic. And that's what makes him do what he does. I mean, and that's just me like surmising that from watching the movie a few times. So it's really cool that they don't hit you over the head with it, but that they still put some breadcrumbs in there to where you can kind of read that into the context of the film, or the subtext of the film. Which idea is the great idea, Danny? I think I'm a little bit behind. And yeah, Allie, living in an RV by the ocean is really not a bad deal, right? Especially like, you know, maybe in the 80s it was like, oh, this poor guy. But now it's like, oh, shit. You could just like dress that RV up real nice. You don't have to pay like property taxes. It's affordable since the dollar is worth so little right now and we're in economically tough times. Living in an RV, getting to listen to the ocean at night and having the birds wake you up in the morning and that fresh air. Good shit. The uplifting Christmas film. Kate, you're hilarious. Yeah, I've got to watch part 2. It's been so long since I've watched Lethal Weapon 2. And I remember Pesci being really funny in that one. And he's in 3 and 4, right? And Chris Rock is in part 4. Isn't Jet Li the bad guy in part 4? I may have only seen that movie in the theater, actually. Mitch says the mistake being made with reboots is the nonsense about quote unquote introducing the franchise to a new audience. Yeah. When parents our age have already shown the originals to that new audience. Yes. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I don't like this idea of Miramax going back to the original for Halloween, because the original's still so good. And like when I was a kid, what got me into Halloween, I was like 9 or 10 years old. So this is like 91 or 92. And I saw Halloween 2 on the USA Network. So it was right around Halloween time. And they were just playing them, cycling them through. So I happened to tune in and it was the beginning, or, you know, maybe a few minutes after Halloween 2 started. So Dick Warlock was my very first Michael Myers. And I just fell in love with it. Like, I tractor beam got sucked into that. And granted, you know, you're watching it on TV, so there's none of the nudity and none of the gore. But that's the perfect way for, you know, a younger audience to experience those things. You can always watch the real versions later. Or maybe if you have, like, super cool parents, they'll show you them. But my parents were cool enough to, like, after seeing that on TV, I went right up to my dad and I was like, I want to dress up as that for Halloween. So my dad took me to the hardware store. We got black and white face paint and a knife that like the blade pushes in and it made a screaming kind of sound. Got me one of those, and I just wore black sweatshirt, black sweatpants, painted my face white with a little bit of black around my eyes, and that was how you dressed up as Michael Myers back in 1991, you know, before they had masks and everything like that. Or at least if they had masks at that point, you know, I was in a tiny town in Alaska, so they certainly weren't in my hometown. So yeah, I mean, you're right, Mitch. I think the idea is you don't need to keep on going back to the well. You know, people say the same thing about Batman. Like, how many Batman movies do we need to see or do we need to have come out that show Bruce's parents getting killed, or they retread all of that? So it's like, I actually like I think it was Batman v Superman, or yeah, BVS, where they show that through the opening credits. So you're going to get the opening credits anyways, and Zack Snyder gets to do some slow motion way of showing this important moment in Bruce's life. So he acknowledges it without really spending like real screen time delving into it. And I think it's the same way with these horror characters. That's why I liked in the reboot or the remake of Friday the 13th that you just see at the very beginning, you just see the opening of Pamela getting killed and that Jason saw the whole thing. It's enough, right? It's not too much, and it gets you right into everything you need to know about the story. And it's another reason why I really liked the pitch animatic. Mitch, have you checked that out, that black and white pitch animatic? Because that kind of does a similar thing where they just throw you right into it. Who knows if they would have like a Loomis type character later on that explains Michael to some people or whatever. But that's the cool thing about that pitch, is that it leaves, it gives you a blank slate other than what happens in that scene. So the rest of the film could be ancillary to that story or be directly connected. Yeah, and Allie, you like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the 2009 Friday the 13th as well. Yeah, I think especially the 2009 remake gets a little bit too much hate, and I get it, it definitely could have been better, and certainly they didn't make a sequel, so something went wrong, whether it was production reasons or if it didn't make enough money. I think I remember it being pretty successful. So I feel like it was just development hell, and then the whole rights issue that's happened after that. But hey, we get the Never Hike Alone series, which is great. I'm still holding out hope that Vin will get his shot to at least be brought in on some level with a studio film about Jason Voorhees. So even if they're not comfortable giving him the reins completely, I think that having somebody like Vin on your team as far as story or script supervisor or some sort of consultant at the very least. But clearly he's shown that he's capable as a writer and a director. I think that he could take on a studio film as far as those skills go. But playing devil's advocate, to bring up Dave McRae again, looking at it more realistically, they would probably want to hire somebody that has previous studio filmmaking experience. It's just the way they work, unfortunately. But I do feel like Vin is the kind of guy that is going to get his chance to do something bigger at some point, for sure. Not only like the skill level that shows up on the screen, but the mind behind it all and being able to coordinate and produce, understanding everyone's job. Just can't say enough great things about the guy, honestly. Let's jump back in here in the chat. The How I Would Make It Better. Oh, sweet, Danny. I'm glad you like that idea. Yeah, I should put something like that together. I actually have a whole bunch of notes for that series of how to make it better. So I was going to do the David Gordon Green Halloween movies, and then really, gosh, you could jump into like Star Wars. You could jump into any film franchise because there's so much to love, but also so much to kind of pick apart and just sort of do those what if scenarios. I think that's one of the most fun things about fandom, and something that fans should always lean into. And it's one of the reasons why I think they should go this anthology route with the television show. Is I think for once, just give the fans something that's like purely for them. And see what happens, because I feel like none of these big studios have ever really done that. Like, we see that Star Wars is pretty much doing the antithesis of what the fandom wants. And maybe they're getting some new people to come in and watch their shows, but I feel like they're losing more original fans than they are gaining new fans. So I feel like, why not just try something different, lean into what the fans would like? And I think that, having these like what if kind of chats with each other, like one of my favorite things to do with my brother Matt, or even with buddies of mine that are nerdy about movies or whatever, is just sit around and talk about the what if scenarios. And just, it's invigorating and exciting to have those conversations. So I'm glad you guys like that idea. I'll have to put something together. Allie says, my son was Michael when he was 9 for Halloween. I got some bad looks from other parents here in the Bible Belt. Yeah, I saw every year since Kate and I have been out here in Arizona. So we moved out here in summer of 2019. And every Halloween since then, I've seen a little kid dressed as Michael. And I dress as Michael every year. That's probably going to change this year. I really loved Thanksgiving. And I want to get that like melted, like more bronze looking John Carver mask and the hat. And I think I want to do John Carver this year. I don't like him more than Michael. Don't get worried. It's just that I've been Michael for the last like 10 years or something like that. And it's been super fun. But I love seeing the little kid Michaels come up. It's really awesome because a lot of times the parents won't even come up once they see the mask. They're like, nope. Like they stay on the sidewalk and the kid walks up. And so anytime I see a kid that's dressed as Michael, I'll get down on one knee and I'm like, let's take a picture together. Do you want to like, you stab me, I stab you? And it's a really cool opportunity just to connect with, I love connecting with horror fans. I don't care who they are, how old they are, what they believe politically, whatever. I feel like we can bond over that thing that we share in common. And I think it's super cool just when someone's into something that's kind of fringe. Like, make no mistake about it, horror is fringe, and that's okay. Like, I think that we should, embrace the things that we like in life. I like some mainstream stuff, but I also like a lot of fringe things. Like, whatever you like, lean into it. As long as it's not hurting anyone else and it's not hurting you, then hell yeah. So when I see these little kids into horror, yeah, I get it. Maybe in the Bible Belt, they they don't want to, they give you a different look because they think that like scary movies are evil for some reason. But I think it's just like, to me, horror movies they're just a roller coaster. I don't like horror movies because I want bad things to happen to real people. We like horror movies because it's exciting to watch, to step up to this, the protection of the screen. So to like walk up to the ledge and look down and see this like scary thing on the screen, but know that there's no real peril there. It's really fun to kind of push that, so. And I always, I think another thing with horror is like the killers are iconic. So, kids like things that are iconic. Like I grew up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Super Mario Brothers. It's totally a different tone, but like Michael, Jason, Leatherface, and Freddy, they are iconic and they stand out in a lineup just like the Mario Brothers and the Ninja Turtles, So, yeah. Mitch, you're right. If anyone has earned their shot, it is Vincent for sure. And Allie agrees as well. He is beyond talented and the nicest friggin' guy. Like, I first met, if you guys have been watching for a while, maybe I'm repeating myself, but hey, in the interest of being Dave McRae Jr., I'll just go ahead and repeat myself. I met Vince at Gathering of the Ghouls out here in Mesa because I had reached out to Cecil because I wanted to do an interview with him for the channel. Dylan's New Nightmare was just a little, I think a week or 10 days away from coming out, and I wanted to have a chat with him about filmmaking, about the process of making that film, and just being a director and writer in general. And, as we're setting everything up, he's like, well, we got like Vin is here if you want Vin in on the interview. And I was just like, oh my God, I only prepared questions for you, Cecil. I'm like, can I rework these questions where some of them are for Vin, some of them are for Cecil? And also, like, Vin was kind of a rock star to me at that point. Like, I had seen not only the Never Hike Alone movies, Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow, but he had also worked on, there was another one that I watched that he worked on, Jason Rising. I think he produced that one. I think he helped them with the story. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I don't think he went any further as far as that involvement goes. But once he, found out they were making it, or somehow those people, they found each other, and he came on to help them out. So to me, he was just sort of like big time. A woman that I went to high school with is in Jason Rising. And so when it came out, you know, we started DMing on Instagram, and I remember saying at that time, so that this was like 2.5 years ago or whenever that was, I was like, man, you guys got Vincent DeSanti on this thing. Like, he is the legit Jason guy. So, and you know, doing the interview with those guys, it was great. That was the first time I had really met Cecil. I was at the Mad Monster premiere, but I didn't talk to him at Mad Monster. So I talked to him at Gathering of the Ghouls about a month later, and both of them were so nice. They weren't in a hurry by any means. We really got to kind of get to know each other through the interview. You guys can check that out here on the channel if you'd like. And then afterwards, I went up to Vin and I was like, hey, do you guys need, like, are you looking for like a matte painter or anything like that for Never Hike Alone 2? And he looked at me. Are you a matte painter? And I was like, no, I'm not a matte painter, but my brother is, and he's worked on all these great films, and he is a horror fan, and I'd love to at least get you guys in touch. If there's some way that you guys can work together, that he can, even if it doesn't work out for Never Hike Alone 2, maybe the next production, you bring him in. And yeah, my brother got to do, I think he's got, excuse me, he's got a few shots in Never Hike Alone 2. There's one of the shots where the campers that find, gosh, why can't I remember his name right now? The main character from Never Hike Alone. Drew Lady's character's name. Why am I blanking on this? But the campers that find him, there's like a shot where like a knife or a spike goes through the back of the guy's head. My brother did that shot of the back of the head. There's some lightning bolts, I think, over the hospital. My brother did the lightning there for the storm. And the big shot that he worked on is that gorgeous bathed in red shot down the hallway where he's like dipped the nurse after gutting her, and the guts are like spilling out. My brother worked on that shot where he like tore up the shirt, sort of like a little bit of continuity work, but also like adding some blood and all that kind of stuff. So it was really cool when the film actually came out and people were freaking out, not just about that shot, but that whole scene where the hospital goes red seemed to be a big favorite of the fans of the film. So it was really cool. I'm texting my brother like, dude, do you have any, like, you got to work on the most iconic shot of Jason in a really long time. Like, fucking awesome. So not only is Vin very talented, but a really sweet guy, and somebody that's just, you know, not that I've worked with him, but in the little bit as far as like doing the interview with him on here, and then interviewing him at Gathering the Ghouls, and him getting hooked up with my brother Matt just seems like a really easy guy to work with. So that's awesome. And we got Tyler Adams in the chat. What's happening, Tyler? Tyler, you're a VFX artist as well, so perfect time for you to jump in the chat there, huh? Oh, thanks for the kind words on the interview, sir. And Tyler, earlier you said here, it's a bummer that they can still pull in at the box office even though they've ignored real criticism. Money doesn't always tell the whole story. That's true. That's why film criticism is useful. Absolutely, Tyler. I completely agree. You know, I'm not like, I don't want to be so cynical, but the idea that like it's only about the money and it's not about like enriching the character or challenging the audience, which I think is maybe the biggest problem that we have with film right now, is a lot of films just don't really want to challenge the audience. They want to tell the audience like exactly, you know, no subtlety. They want to hit you over the head with the point of the story. They're really in your face about it. And yeah, they ignore real criticism. If you don't like the movie, it must be because you have some sort of prejudice or hateful bias. Not just that you prefer the way things used to go, but that your feelings on the film, they'll tell you that it's coming from a hateful, toxic place, which I think is total bullshit and a complete cop out. And I guess whatever makes you sleep better at night for the people that are making those movies, but go watch Godzilla Minus One and tell me that that's not an awesome movie that lets the audience engage, doesn't tell the audience every damn thing, gives you emotion, gives you characters that have real flaws that you still want to root for, and you know, paints like a really nice picture of what's going on in post World War II Japan. But it's a story that is so relatable for every audience. Like, I'm sitting there the first time watching the movie, tearing up in multiple scenes, and also saying to myself, wow, we're not too different. Like, these different cultures, and, you know, the way Japan felt after the war, the way that those characters feel about their government is the way that I feel about our government a lot of the times. It was just a really cool, subtle way of bringing that commonality. And I think that's something that like films are kind of missing. Like, it seems like nowadays it's, let's see how divisive we can make the film. And let's push the divisiveness in the media side of things. So let's elevate the people that are saying these great things that are maybe being a bit too nice. And then let's like squash the people that have any criticism and say that the only reason why they don't like it is because of what's between the performer's legs or what color their skin is, which I think is a total farce. You guys have probably heard me say this on the channel before. And I know Danny, when we, you know, chatted on Instagram a few weeks ago, we talked about this where like, go back and watch some movies from the 70s and the 80s. Because there are plenty of women and non-white people, you know, in good roles. Like, good roles that aren't necessarily caricatures. Maybe sometimes they are, but I think sometimes the white characters are caricatures too. That's just something that you're going to get in film, no matter who's on screen, right? I mean, it's because it's about the writing. But, you know, like, you go back and watch a movie like RoboCop and like the chief of police is a black guy. No one says one damn thing. Like, they have co-ed locker rooms in RoboCop. There are women in positions of power in that movie. I think the whole, like, I think that's honestly just a completely made up storyline in the media now, that now we're finally getting movies where women are in prominent roles, and we're finally getting roles for characters that aren't white people or what. I just like, I just feel like Hollywood's always been a pretty good mix for about 50 years now. So to act like it's just now happening, I think does a bit of a disservice to the people that were doing it when it was maybe not more risky, but when it was something that maybe, you know, got people a little too excited in a negative way. But I'm a big Bobby Kennedy fan, like the original Bobby Kennedy. And you know, one of the things that he would always say in his speeches is that, or specifically after the day that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, Bobby was supposed to give a campaign speech to the people at Ball State in Indiana. I think Indianapolis is where Ball State is at. And so he was going to give a campaign speech, and then they find out that Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed. And, you know, this is before 24/7 news, so that audience doesn't know. It's a predominantly black audience that he's talking to. And he says some things about, you know, he gives them the news, everyone reacts, and he talks about, we can lean into this like lawless nature of our country, or we can find compassion and love for one another. And he's like, in my experience, I think a majority of white people and the majority of black people want to get along and do get along in this country. And so he said that in 1968. So if somebody running for president said that in 1968, then I think it's safe to say that like, we're not really being told the full story here, or we're being told the story from a certain point of view that keeps the division as a problem, you know, or as a constant, as it were. So yeah, not to get, don't want to get too political here. If I ever get political on the channel, I want it to come from a nice warm place. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is just show that I think that we have more in common with our neighbors than the media and the government wants us to think we do. Hopefully that's not too controversial. Yeah, that hospital scene, Allie, so good. And you know, Doug Tate as like is he a deputy? He is really good. Like, I love seeing a guy. I know he's also he directed a film that came out not too long ago. But Doug Tate is one of these guys that's like a stunt performer that's got so much personality. I think he only has a few lines of dialogue in Never Hike Alone 2, but what he does with his face when he in acting, the going back with Sheriff Rick Cologne, he has like this concern on his face when Cologne is like, "Good day, deputy, like get the hell out of my face." I thought Doug Tate did a really good job there. It's always cool to see a stunt person show that they've got more than just a physically imposing presence that they can use. When the whole movie looks at the camera and says, "And let this be a lesson to you kids out there." Yeah, the whole, like, what Marvel's been doing lately, I think their TV shows have been really bad at it. And I even feel like, as a guy that liked the first, like, few Kevin Smith movies, I'm like, man, he started to get like that quite a bit too, where it's a bit too on the nose. When it comes to Kevin Smith, for me, it's like, I like Mallrats and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back the most because they're the silliest. That's what I'm there for. Whatever else I gather from that about what it says about growing up, like, I think Mallrats does have a few lessons in there, but it's not the point of the story. The point of the story is just to watch these characters interact with each other. It's, I think Kevin Smith probably didn't give himself enough credit in his early days for creating like higher art. And then once people were like, "Oh, you create high art," then he got a bit up his own ass with the whole thing. So Ghostbusters 2016 had an oversaturated color palette. That opinion makes me a sex racist or something. Yeah, Mitch, I never watched that 2016 Ghostbusters because it, to me, I just, like, the preview didn't interest me. I'm like, man, these jokes that they're making only make sense if the characters, there was some joke where Leslie, like, gets dropped in the pit, or while she's crowd surfing they drop her or something, and she's like, "I don't know if this is a black thing or a lady thing, but that was messed up." And I'm like, so the joke that you wrote for your movie only works if the characters are racist and or sexist. That's weird. That's a weird, like, kind of self-aware humor to bring into something like Ghostbusters. Seems like more like a joke that you would make in like Family Guy. Something a bit more self-aware. Yeah, just not really interested. I didn't even watch Afterlife either, because I'm just sort of over the whole like nostalgia pull kind of thing at this point too. And Paul Rudd kind of bums me out that he doesn't really want to acknowledge being Tommy Doyle in Curse of Michael Myers. So I'm sort of like, screw off, Paul Rudd. But please come to H45. The OG Star Trek had everybody, and they had the first interracial kiss ever. Yeah, Danny. There you go. Thank you for bringing that one up. And maybe the complaint that people are making is like, it's just not enough of it back then. And it's like, well, so let's break down the population on a pie graph, right? And then look at how they cast movies now and ask yourself if that's really an accurate representation of the people that live in the country. So, yeah, I mean, but whatever. To me, the biggest thing is, does the performer do the job well? And is the writing good? To me, those are the two most important things. Like, first off, write a good movie. Second off, hire the actor or actress that's best for the job, period. Of course, there are instances where maybe when you're writing a movie, you write the character to be of a certain race or a certain gender because it helps tell the story, and that's fair. But like Night of the Living Dead. Let's talk about that real quick. So when Dwayne Jones was hired for Night of the Living Dead to play Ben, Romero did not write the character as a black man. Romero went on record plenty of times saying that he just cast the person that gave the best audition. So it worked out great that it makes the story more poetic and more heartbreaking. And it makes the commentary work. But it wasn't the intention, which is sometimes the best thing to happen with art, right? Like an artist creates something and then the audience sees something in it. And maybe sees something in it that makes the artist go, "Oh wow, like that's awesome that it worked out that way. You found something more meaningful in my work than I ever thought possible." You know, and who knows, maybe that propelled Romero in his later films to bring more commentary into it because of the reaction that Night of the Living Dead got. But yeah, that character was not written as a black man. But certainly when you watch it, it's difficult to not get those feelings. You know, the movie came out in 1968. It was, I think they were driving. It was making its way to Hollywood from Pittsburgh when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. It was in that same time period. So, you know, all these things came together in a really interesting, timely manner. And yeah, I mean, that movie, Night of the Living Dead, changed the way I looked at film forever. When I first saw that, I was 16 years old. I never thought a black and white movie could be so interesting. I thought zombies looked amazing in black and white. Like the contrast, you don't have to worry about the color or really like getting the makeup to match that well, because even in the instances in that film where the color or the makeup is a little chintzy, it just, you know, maybe a little more slapdash, the black and white kind of plays into that and makes them look like undead creatures. So for me, the black and white really works. Even though in '68 there was the technology to make color films, but I think it was just a little cheaper for them at the time to pay for the black and white film since they were just getting started. Noel Neal's Lois Lane in the 50s was a badass. She charged forward regardless of the threat. If someone sees that as a damsel in distress, then they are the problem. Yeah, Mitch, I'm glad that we're right on the same page about that. I think, yeah, it does a disservice to act like all the old-fashioned stuff was like so old-fashioned that it was all the same. Clearly, I mean, Hollywood's been like kind of patting themselves on the back forever about being more inclusive than, maybe middle America or whatever the heck they want to call it, you know? So I think it's kind of weird then to act like, everything that was done in the past is, maybe, I guess they just figure that people aren't thinking about that or looking back into it. Yeah, Tyler, you're right. Countless movies, but recently Halloween Kills, Joker, Rise of Skywalker did really hit you over the head with signaling and explaining. I didn't pick up on it too much from Joker, but I've only seen Joker once. However, I did enjoy it enough to purchase a copy on 4K Blu-ray. But yeah, I get what you mean. Like, I guess thinking back in the Joker, it's such a focused story. Like, you spend so much time with what's his friggin' name? I can't remember his actual name that they give him. But you spend so much time with that Joker character, and he's an unreliable narrator or unreliable like main character kind of. So yeah, I guess I can kind of see, especially maybe some of those mob scenes at the end where everyone's like dressing up as Joker, or is that in his head? Like, who the hell knows? But I do think a lot of that film like worked really well, and I like that they went back to like the film had like an older kind of gritty look to it. Oh, Danny, you talking about Bobby Kennedy literally calming the crowd down? Yeah, imagine just how scary that could be to announce that news. Even though you're a Kennedy and you're a Democrat and probably in good favor with the crowd, like it's got to be a pretty difficult bit of news to deliver. That speech, if you guys haven't watched that speech, it's amazing. Like, he starts quoting like the Greek poet Aeschylus. There's something about Bobby where his mind was like next level. You know, if he had lived and been able to become president, it's crazy to think about what our country, talk about a what if, what our country would look like if Bobby had been president for 8 years, you know? Because, yeah, he really calms that crowd down. And I think one of the really cool things he says is he's like, you know, I'd understand that given that, you know, this was probably a white man that did this shooting, I could understand that, you know, most of you would be angry, but I want you to know that he's like, I can relate because my brother was killed and he was killed by a white man. So he does a really good job of just building that commonality. Bobby was just, you know, very seldomly in politics and with people that are intellectuals do we get somebody that seems like they're so sincere and really want to see the best lives for as many people as possible. And I think that's kind of what Bobby was about, which I guess just goes to show that I'm not surprised that something happened to him because, you know, whenever you're about to get a good thing, somebody's got to get rid of it. She-Hulk was crazy, Danny says. As a comic book nerd, I was like, what? Yeah, I read like the first 5 issues of She-Hulk before that show came out, so I could. I didn't watch the show, but I watched the trailer and saw some clips of it and stuff. I thought the original 5 issues of that comic are really fun and entertaining, and yeah, it seemed like with She-Hulk, they're like, we're just gonna do another one of these things where the woman is, or you know, the marginalized lead character is perfect. Everyone else wants to like put them down just because of what's between their legs or the color of their skin. And the men are all dumb. And it was just like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't want female characters that have flaws because I think women are shitty. I want female characters that have flaws because it makes them interesting. Like, I would probably like something like Captain Marvel a lot more if Captain Marvel had a bit of a personality. Like, Brie Larson is just kind of boring to me as a performer. You know, Tony Stark has flaws. Captain America has flaws. The characters that have flaws are interesting. And the idea of like, if we put flaws on this character, then people are going to think that we're being racist or sexist. It's just like, is anyone walking around right now that's perfect? No. I think maybe that's like a bigger issue because I think a lot of what social media does is like, you be you. Like, don't let anyone tell you anything. Like, you're perfect the way you are. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, you shouldn't fundamentally change who you are just to get people to like you. Yeah. But, like, do you have stuff you could work on? Probably. Like, everyone else does on planet Earth. Like, this isn't a secret. Like, no one's walking around out there perfect. So, to assume that, or to bring up a flaw, whether it's in a personal relationship or a made-up character in a comic book or a movie, to bring up a flaw and then have that flaw like be taken so personally as if there's no way this person could have this flaw. I don't understand it. I mean, Luke Skywalker is one of the greatest heroes in cinematic history, and he is peppered with flaws. His flaws are why he grows in every subsequent film. Like he has the set of issues he has in the original Star Wars are different than the sets of issues he has in Empire and different than the issues that he has in Return of the Jedi. But within each film, he grows and learns something more about himself, about others, about the Force, about the philosophy of life and you know what it's all about. And that's why we love Luke. We don't love Luke because he's a guy. Like, this idea that you could just like throw a man in any role in any movie, and like every man is gonna like say that that's the best character ever. It's simply not true. Just look at the box office receipts for countless movies starring men that have failed, and failed because probably the writing was bad and the performance was bad, right? That's what it's always gonna come back to that. Yeah, Kate, there's another one of those Ghostbusters coming out, the Frozen Empire, or as I like to call it, Ghostbusters Chillnado, because it reminded me of the Sharknado movies with the storm. Tony Todd told that story about playing Ben in the because he played Ben in the Night of the Living Dead remake, yeah, which is a good remake. You know, no remakes are really like necessarily necessary, but it's a good remake for sure. As Bob Ross used to say, happy accidents. Yes, I'm a big Bob Ross fan. I love his philosophy on everything, and I have like for real ASMR triggers, so Bob Ross's voice and like the tapping of the knife really work for me on that level too. But I love his artwork and just his outlook on life, and really positive, you know, like we were just saying, that whole kind of like, do you lean into the things that you like? It's not about assuming that you're perfect, but it's about like, you know, being okay with yourself and finding a way to express yourself. I love that about Bob. Yeah, Dawn of the Dead is awesome, Tyler. That's a classic. Absolute classic. Day of the Dead is my favorite of the Romero zombie films, but I certainly understand that Dawn is the fan favorite, and I totally get why. I like how grimy Day of the Dead is. There's some lines of dialogue in that movie that are just as good as it gets as far as Romero's writing for me. And Savini's special effects are the best I've ever seen in Day of the Dead. At Gnat Podcast, welcome to the stream. So what you've missed so far is I'm not too pumped on this idea of Miramax going back to the original Halloween for their TV show, because I don't really know who this show is meant for. If you want to know about Michael and learn about the character, you can go back to the original. You can go through the whole choose your own adventure. Here, let me bring up that choose your own adventure here again. So you can go to this choose your own adventure way of looking at things. You can certainly learn about the character that way. If you're already not interested in Michael and you've never taken the time to dive into Halloween, then what is a TV show going to do to pull you in and to make you want to learn about this character that has over 45 years of history that you could dive into and learn about? So me, I sort of just like scratch my head on that one, and I'm just like, I don't know who this is for. This is not for the fans. So I had gone through some of the ideas that I had. Here, I can run through them really quick here for you. Let me just get into my tablet here. Oh yeah. So the idea that I have for a television series is an anthology series. And in that anthology series, you would have each season would be 4 to 6 episodes, kind of like a mini series. And it would be a contained story. And each contained story, each season, would be like a what if scenario, or maybe even like tying up a loose end or going to one of the many dead ends in the franchise. So, I mean, you could go back to Season of the Witch. You could continue that story, or maybe even tell that story within the first 2 episodes and then take it further. You could do, you know, Dwight H. Little came out, what was it, last month, and talked about Halloween 4 Part 2 and bringing Danielle back 40 years later. So you could do Halloween 4 Part 2 as its own season contained. You could do the original Halloween 2 pitch where Laurie's in college. She's living in an apartment in a high rise in the city, and Michael comes after her. You could do, I think we were talking, Mitch mentioned one earlier about where John Tate and Jamie Lloyd meet in a support group. And so I was kind of like, well, you could do an H2O follow-up. So you could do Halloween 4 Part 2, then you could do an H2O follow-up where you bring Josh Hartnett back, and then maybe you could do a season where they meet each other, or maybe they meet each other in that H2O follow-up, and Jamie, you could still make her canon, you know? Because they don't specifically say that she's not canon in H2O. It's just that they don't acknowledge her. You could bring Rob Zombie back in and have him do a season where he gets to follow up his Halloween 2, which I really like Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I don't love everything about it. Not everything works, but I like when they do something different with these characters that we've seen. You know, so many sequels do so much of the same thing that I like when one of the sequels comes along and actually attempts something a little more risky. That's why I like the idea of this anthology series. I realize that an anthology series geared towards the fans is a risk, and that maybe it's more financially secure to go back to the original and just play it safe. But again, who is the show for? Who are you bringing in that's not there already? And I think Halloween fans deserve some of these what if scenarios and some of these like pipe dreams. We deserve to see them come to fruition. And, you know, from my experience at H45 and seeing the long lines for all of these all these actors that have played characters maybe in just 1 or 2 movies, I think the fans would go nuts over in an anthology series that brings all these characters back in such, in such a way where it is confined. So it's not that you're looking for seasons of these stories that keeps on continuing, because that's a big problem I have with television in general that I mentioned earlier. Is the first 10 minutes of an episode are good, there's 20 minutes of bullshit, and then the last 10 minutes are good and leave you with a cliffhanger. And the whole point of the show is just to make you watch commercials and come back for the next episode. So it's not about storytelling. It's not about trying to be satisfy the fans or anything like that. And I think that we've seen with Star Wars and all this other stuff, creative types not giving the fans what they want. I think that Halloween fans deserve something that they would actually want. So that's kind of what we've covered so far. And then I just jumped into the chat, and we're just kind of bouncing ideas off each other and seeing what we think. But yeah, there's who is it that wrote it? I can't remember right now off the top of my head. I've tried to be really good with names as best I can when we're live. But there was the Halloween 4. Is it Dennis Farrens? Is that his name? He wrote a Halloween 4. John Carpenter wanted to come back and direct it, and it's where Haddonfield had canceled Halloween. They're talking about bringing it back, and it's literally like the spirit of Michael Myers comes back to wreak havoc. And I think even at one point Michael's like 12 feet tall or something ridiculous. So it's like this thing where it's like now it's in your head, and it sort of leans more into that whole, like, is Haddonfield sort of this Bermuda Triangle of mysterious evil? Like, there's no way to really pin it down. Is that why Charlie Bowles did what he did? Is that why Michael did what he did? You can even tie it in with Season of the Witch in some way too. So if you want to go that route with the television series and just have it be called like Haddonfield and it's like little vignettes, I like that idea. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, for the TV series, I want a bunch of small ideas that can be fully fleshed out for what the idea is, and that we're not trying to take one idea and stretch it into something new and meaningful, because I don't think there's much from the original Halloween that you can turn into something else. You can always go back and watch the original film. You can always go back and watch any of the Choose Your Own Adventures and all that stuff. So let's just leave Michael to the films, and we can find a way to reboot him there. But I think with the TV show, let's do something different. Let's have a TV show and movie that are like next to each other, that are ancillary to one another, and they're not necessarily interwoven, but that maybe Michael is a bit of a constant in the TV show. But it's really more about the other characters. It's about Jamie. It's about John. It's about Dr. Chalice. It's, whatever we want to do. see if Paul Rudd will finally admit that he was in a Halloween movie and come back and play Tommy Doyle. Yeah, whatever. But yeah, let me know at Gnat Podcast. I'm again going live. It's like I've been to your channel, I've watched your videos, and I'm trying to remember exactly. It's another something podcast, right? But yeah, let me know what your ideas are, if you've got a pitch for the TV show, or just how you feel about that the Miramax idea of going right back to the Michael Myers well. Tyler Adams' Joker is pretty perfect, but the scene where they don't trust the audience to understand that things are in his head. Yeah, I get you. I think a lot of movies kind of fall into that trap, right? Where at some point a producer is going to step in and be like, but I don't get it, or I don't think people are going to get it. And I think, we need a smarter audience, but the only way we're going to get a smarter audience is if we do challenge the audience with smarter storytelling. And then the great thing about that is as the audience gets smarter, the writing gets smarter, right? Because the writers have to outdo themselves, and then audience members become writers. So if you're a little kid and you grow up watching a bunch of great writing on the screen or reading awesome books or, comics, whatever it is, then you could grow up to be a great writer yourself. So great art makes for a smarter audience. A smarter audience demands more great art, and then the art just gets better, the audience gets smarter, and you can still make movies like Thanksgiving that have a fun time, and we're gonna love those too. That's like When Evil Lurks and Thanksgiving. I'm like, I don't know which one I liked more, because it's so difficult to compare those two movies. Like, I probably had more fun with Thanksgiving, and it's like a masterclass in slasher filmmaking. But When Evil Lurks is a better made film, and much more disturbing and creepy, and a masterclass in a totally different way. A beautiful film, some of the best acting I've ever seen. So that's kind of the fun thing about film and about art too, is like, you can't necessarily compare a movie like Thanksgiving with a movie like When Evil Lurks, even though they're both horror, because they're both aiming for something completely different, right? So it's like when you're ranking a horror movie versus like Halloween versus Citizen Kane. Like, I think I like Halloween more than I like Citizen Kane, but Citizen Kane is a more impressive piece of filmmaking, and one of the best films ever made. I think it is, rightfully gets all the praise that it does. So it's so tough to compare something like Halloween to something like Citizen Kane, Danny says, right, look at Carol on The Walking Dead, Ripley in Alien, Linda Hamilton in T2. Yeah, the strong female characters have been there for friggin' decades. Longer than I've been alive. Tyler says, Captain Marvel, the film was boring. Yeah, I fell asleep. I finally watched The Marvels. I liked the character a lot more in that. But also that movie was underwhelming. It was fine. Yeah, and so here's the problem is Captain Marvel was so bad. And then in the media, you're basically telling me that you don't need or want me as a fan, because I don't love everything you're already doing. So I didn't watch The Marvels. I don't see a reason to watch The Marvels. Like, you have to earn my money and earn my time. I'm not just going to give it to you just because I watched everything else. I'm done doing that. I got rid of my Disney Plus a long time ago, over a year ago, and I don't regret it, because those TV shows started to get really crappy. I think I watched the first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier, and it was about as gloomy as you could get. I didn't want any part of that. Like, you're going to call a show Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then you're going to make it the most depressing shit. No, I didn't do it. Ronnie, you must be the podcast. Oh, another thing I was thinking about doing, because I played music for a really long time. I was like, I could put some songs on my channel. I could just really confuse YouTube and not let them know what the heck I'm going to do next. Let me know in the comments or in the chat if you want to hear me play guitar, because that could get fun. Allie says that ending scene with Scout in RZ2 I thought was good. She is super talented. Yeah, the a lot of her performance in that movie is so intense. She is really good. I don't really like his remake very much, other than a few things. That the scene where he like kills the Strodes is super brutal, and I think done in a really good way. Something that probably should have happened in the original, actually. But other than that, I think his remake is just it's just kind of pointless to me. I don't get anything new. I don't need Michael explained away as like like a bullied kid or anything like that. Not necessary. To me, it's scarier that he was a normal kid that ends up on going on a killing streak and then not talking and killing 15 years later. So, but yeah, her performance in that remake is good. Just playing like the light, playful Lori, and then to see that transition to the sequel where she's just super dark and really going through some shit. Margot Kidder is really good as the psychiatrist in that film. Brad Dourif's performance in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is arguably maybe the best one I've seen from him ever. Just the one scene where he finds Annie it's super powerful. I mean, the people that if you hate Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, I guess I'm just curious to know why it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, can't you still enjoy a movie and not like everything about it? Like I really like the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but there are whole plot threads that I would just yank right out of there because they don't work for me at all. And I don't understand why she always has to have a boyfriend and stuff like that. But it's like, it doesn't mean I hate the show. Like, I think the show is a great show, but there's things about it that I don't like. I'm not so wrapped up in my emotions about things that I like that I can't allow them to be criticized or can't criticize them myself. I'm a big punk rock fan, and I know that a lot of times punk rock records don't necessarily sound that great. I'm willing to admit that. That's part of the charm that I actually like. It's like watching a horror movie that just looks kind of dirty, like it's part of the reason why you like it, Let's see here. But yeah, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 gets so much hate, and I was surprised because when I saw it, I thought I was going to hate it based on how I felt about the remake, and I actually really loved it from the first time I saw it. Scout is legit, says Danny. That scene stays with you. Yeah. It would be really interesting to see similar to like following up the Halloween 4 with a part 2, seeing what happens to Jamie 40 years later without having 5 or 6 as canon. Like if you brought Rob Zombie back, like what would a sequel series to his Halloween 2 look like? Like, is Laurie going to be the killer? Like, what happens? And like I'd said earlier, like, get Tarantino in there. Like, bring in some filmmakers that know they just have like 3 or 4 months to work on this thing, shoot everything, and be done with it. And they get to go on with their regular lives. They don't, it's not like David Gordon Green having to do 3 movies back to back to back, or bringing in Mike Flanagan or Robert Eggers. Those guys have projects that they're working on that they should be working on because they're talented creative people, right? So you don't want to pull them away off track from that too much, but bring them over for a little bit, have them do a season. It could be, and then each season's got a really cool, unique look to it. I know it's my idea, so I'm probably stroking it a bit much, but I think that we could have something really special here if they do an anthology series where each season is a single contained story that follows up from a loose end or a dead end in the storied Halloween and storied and numerous thread Halloween franchise that we've got. How's it going? 42 set. Hey! All right. All the good names are taken. When Evil Lurks was so amazing. Almost a perfect movie. Yeah. When Evil Lurks is so damn good. Oh, and Danny couldn't do Secret Invasion. Samuel Jackson couldn't save it. That's too bad. Yeah, I'm sick of your scraps, Hollywood. Like, stop throwing me your scraps and wanting me to call it filet mignon, like, because it ain't. Like, and you guys know, because you had the whole entire audience on your side for like a decade, Disney. So that whole Marvel team, they know. They know how to do it because they did it so well for so long. And then they got cocky, right? They're like, all right, now we're going to tell these friggin' peons in society how they need to live their lives and that they're not quite living up to our standards here in Hollywood, even though we can't get anything figured out because we're assaulting each other in, behind closed doors rampantly. So who the heck are they? It's just like, it's like a church getting self-righteous. It's like, are you serious? Like, do you want to take a look at everything you guys have swept under the rug? And I feel the same way about Hollywood. And I'm not anti-religion. Like, I grew up Catholic. I had a great experience growing up Catholic, but clearly there are plenty of people that grew up in that religion or way of life that didn't have that experience. And, like in the theme of everything else I've said today, if there's a flaw, then call out the flaw regardless of where it's coming from. So yeah, it's just, I feel like Hollywood, you don't really have that big of a pedestal to stand on. Evil Monsterism. Welcome to the chat, Evil Monsterism. Been really enjoying engaging with you in the chats over on Dave's live streams. It's fun to like find that like buddy in the chat. And Dave is so great at, making sure he's paying attention to everyone in there and, doing a really good job of always making sure that he's dipping in. So that's really cool. And you're so much fun in that chat. It's great to see you here. Evil Monsterism says, I really liked Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. The dark fall / nighttime cinematography was off the charts awesome. Yeah, some of the lighting in that movie, I think like he's got a good eye for visuals in film for sure. I think his writing is like the biggest struggle, and I don't think that's a secret for anyone that, whether or not you like his movies, writing is definitely something that could usually be better. And I think the writing is better in the sequel for sure. I kind of, people hate on Hobo Myers. I kind of like that Hobo Myers, like, when he puts on his mask, it's like, all right, now it's go time. I do like that sort of juxtaposition. It's like Superman going in the phone booth and spinning around and coming out. Clark goes in, spins out, comes out as Superman. And Michael walks around, people give him some shit, he puts on his mask, and now it's time to take care of some business. And I really liked that. And yeah, the aesthetically, the film looks great. Man, when he goes into the strip club there and kills the stripper and the owner and the broken arm on that guy, the practical effects, man, are gut-wrenching. I mean, it's like that's why, I haven't seen the Terrifier movies yet because I watched All Hallows Eve and I just wasn't like, it didn't do much for me. Like, Art the Clown is just so over the top, and I don't know. I don't know if I need something that's like brutal for brutality's sake. I like when it's a little bit more like a dream, right? So like not every kill needs to be over the top, but you have a couple kills that push it, right? And then you've got some kills that kind of walk you up to the edge. I felt like Thanksgiving was a really good, found that balance. The first 2/3 of the movie, the kills are fun, but relatively tame. And then you get to the scene where he's cooked Kathleen and he's cutting off a piece of her leg. And, Rick Hoffman's character is like barfing through the gag that's in his mouth. And, they push it a little further, but they get like right to that point that for my taste, and, it's all about like what your taste is. It just seemed like the perfect, it was pitch perfect for me, something like Thanksgiving. Whereas I'm a huge Evil Dead fan and I love how hardcore Evil Dead goes. I felt like Evil Dead Rise kind of held back. So I walked out of the theater for Evil Dead Rise thinking that it was like a C+, B-. There's no bad movies in the Evil Dead franchise, which is awesome. And I think Ash vs. Evil Dead is a great show as well. So that's the, you know, it's just like, I feel the same way kind of about Scream, where it's like there's not a bad one in the series, but there are films that don't work as well for me. You know, Evil Dead Rise was okay. Scream 5 and 6, they're okay. Not great. Especially the killer reveal. Really rough killer reveals on Scream 5 and 6. Especially Tyler, you want to talk about getting hit over the head. Scream 5 is basically like, if you critique movies, you're like basically a psycho killer. Like, you're on the verge, bud, so you better stop saying all that mean stuff about The Last Jedi before you start killing people. It's fucking ridiculous. Scraps and the habit Hollywood has of pulling the bait and switch. Yep, Mitch, you're right. They've done that in a lot of those Disney shows. Oh, yeah. Oh, Allie. See, I knew it was... I all the good names are taken, or already taken. Are taken. Okay. All the good names are taken. That, yes, it was so familiar to me, and I'm like trying to think of what that acronym was. Danny says the sad part is they have the IP. Yeah. Yeah, you know, and that's why it doesn't do any good to like jump into like the super toxic end of the pool. I have no problem like critiquing things, but it's like, you know, and I wanted to come on live here with you guys, not just because I didn't, if all my thought was I don't like that idea for that TV show, I wouldn't have said anything about it. I wanted to come on here because ever since Cecil and I talked on the Horror Show channel last fall when the rights got settled, and I mentioned that when we talked about the news, I had mentioned my idea of an anthology series. So I wanted to follow up because this isn't about just tearing down the idea and not offering anything else up. This is about saying, I don't think this idea is that good. Here are the reasons why, and here's an idea that I have that I think would work better. You know, you can laugh at me or say I'm wrong if you want, and that's totally fine too. But yeah, I think like you just kind of have to let go, Danny, until the rights revert or go somewhere else. Or God forbid they learn a lesson from the box office and stop blaming the audience and start hiring people that can just tell better stories. Again, you can have ethnically diverse and gender diverse performers. I don't care. Give me a good story. Give me characters that are flawed, that learn things about themselves, learn things about each other, and learn things about the world in a greater sense and come out of the story better than they were before. And they're not perfect. You can have another movie where something creeps back in or something that they haven't quite yet addressed, you know? There's plenty to work with, and I think Hollywood could have their cake and eat it too if they just hired good writers and cast whoever you want, as long as they're good performers. And I wholeheartedly believe that you can find a good actor in any skin tone, whatever's going on between the legs. There's somebody that can fit that, right? There's got to be a good performer. And if there's not, you're just not looking hard enough or not giving enough people opportunities in auditions. So yeah, this whole idea that like we just need to like everyone needs to be a token cast. It's like, who the hell wants that? Like, is that really like, is that how you want to get like a leg up, is to be tokenized? Like that? I don't know. It's tough to put myself in those shoes, but like, I think I would be bummed out if I were in a group and I felt like the only reason why somebody was in this movie that looked like me was because I was being like pandered to. I would think that that's more insulting than like this idea of like, oh wow, I felt like I was finally seeing that like someone on screen looked like me. I don't know. I've never felt that way because I've related. I mean, come on, we're a bunch of horror fans. We grew up watching Final Girls. So we grew up relating to the women, the young women in these horror movies. You relate with Laurie Strode. You relate with Sidney Prescott. You relate with Nancy Nancy, why can't I think of her last name? How do you guys like that sound? Nancy Thompson. There we go. You know, it's just that kind of shit cracks me up. That they try to make you feel like, oh, men can only relate with men, white people can only relate with white people, that everything has to be so like compartmentalized. And I don't think that I'm saying anything like too out there or too groundbreaking. I'm not trying to say I'm special. I think most people feel that way, where they just want to see a good character that they can relate with, and it doesn't have to look exactly like them. Mitch says Terrifier is good for what it is, but that's about it. It's basically gross out porn. Yeah, and that's why I don't know if I can watch it. I don't like watching movies and like feeling dirty. When I was in my 20s, I did that whole, you know, I watched movies like I Spit on Your Grave and The Last House on the Left. You know, those really tough, grimy 70s movies. And at that age, you know, for me, I wanted to experience everything that film had to offer. And then I think like the older I've gotten, the less I'm like into watching stuff that's like exploitative. Even something like Passion of the Christ, that's like, it's just too hardcore for me. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm a wuss. Maybe I shouldn't be covering horror on YouTube. Or maybe I should just watch the Terrifier movies so I can cover them on I Finally Watched It. And then I can actually like talk about it with full knowledge. Because again, I've only seen the All Hallows Eve. Didn't enjoy it. I didn't understand. I'm like a killer that can't die and can teleport. It's kind of like Michael Myers from the Rob Zombie remake, where it's like, how am I supposed to be scared of a guy that can like break through an oak door? Like, how am I? Where's the fear in something that I know is just going to kill me anyways? If this truly is unstoppable, then why am I scared? Because I might as well just surrender myself to it. It's like running zombies. Like, I think you can handle running zombies the right way. I think the Dawn of the Dead remake did about as good of a job as you can doing that. And Return of the Living Dead does a great job of it, but it's also more of like a dark comedy than a straight up horror movie. But yeah, running zombies to me, I'm like, well, you might as well just give yourself up. Like, to me, the scary thing about zombies is they represent like actual death. Like, you can board up the windows and the doors and do everything you can to try to stop this thing, but it's a force that is going to make its way to you. And what made Michael Myers scary for me, and I think like even scarier every time I go back to the original Halloween film, is that it's a regular sized man that has inexplicable supernatural strength, but he's not literally breaking through doors, right? So yeah, with All Hallows Eve, I'm like, well, Art can't be destroyed and he can teleport. This is just like being stuck in hell. You might as well just let this guy kill you, you know, mutilate your body. And that's another thing too, like the hardcore mutilation stuff. I don't know. I guess, you know, different strokes for different folks, but I suppose I should just watch it, just so I can legitimately give everybody a true reaction to those Terrifier movies. Cecil from the Horror Show channel, shout out to Cecil and everyone at the Horror Show channel. That's Jaime and Fuego, Robert the Wolfman, everybody else, Morgan, love those guys over there. Love being a part of that team. You know, when they invite me, it's always a great time over there. But he let me borrow Terrifier and Terrifier 2. So I've had his Blu-rays for a while, and I should just shut up and watch them and cover them here on the channel. Danny says, I don't, and I am biracial. I want quality. Yes, quality, not necessarily equality, right? As far as equality, that everything has to be, it's like, you know, I don't know if you guys have seen that video of Jerry Seinfeld where the guy's like, on your show, a lot of the comedians are white men, and he's like, oh great, yeah, let's get into that. And he's like, everyone wants to look at everything and see if it's like a perfectly dissected pie of like everyone's equally represented. And yeah, it's like, you just want if a good movie stars a black person, an Asian person, I don't give a fuck. Like, I want the movie to be good. so sorry that I'm interested in the actual like piece of work here, the product of it all, right? Like Godzilla minus one is exactly what like Hollywood needs to watch that and say, oh my God, maybe we hire visual effects artists to direct movies because there's so much you can do with visual effects now that you don't even need to you don't even need to have a drone shot. You can make a fake drone shot with visual effects with matte paintings and make it look just as believable as a drone shot. You can not cut the budget on VFX, but have somebody that's at the helm of the project that understands visual effects because film, let's just face it, guys, filmmaking is dependent on effects. It's always been a part of film, but I think there are so many effects. And Tyler, I'm sure you can attest to this. Let me know in the chat. There are so many visual effects in films that you wouldn't even know are happening. So many shots. Anytime you see a helicopter in a movie, it's probably not real. And like, but they do a really good job of making it believable. Maybe when something explodes, you can kind of see a little bit of the fakeness of it. But I swear there are shots of like trains and cars and all that stuff that none of that stuff is there. So you hire a filmmaker with a VFX background, like, Tim Miller from Deadpool was a VFX guy, brought in his visual effects house. That's why they were able to make that movie so relatively cheap. It was probably like 30 some million. And for a movie like Deadpool, like that's cheap. I know it is a lot of money. But yeah, Godzilla minus one was a really low budget. I think, what was it? Was it just $7 or $8 million that they spent on that? Which is crazy. So Hollywood needs to take a book out of that page, not only in who you hire as far as the production goes, but also, how you think about telling the story. Because, man, I think they give you they weave this awesome tapestry of storytelling. Does not come at the sacrifice of Godzilla being an awesome force in that film. So they found the great mix of the human story and the monster story, which I think a lot of the Godzilla movies either go too far one way or the other. But I felt like Godzilla minus one was right in the middle. It reminded me a lot of Jaws, which is my favorite film of all time. So anytime you can remind me of Jaws or conjure up those feelings, like when the guys are out on the boat, I got big time Jaws vibes. But just that overall idea of a movie that is thrilling, suspenseful, horrific, dramatic, and even comedic at times. Like Jaws has all of those. Godzilla minus one has all of those. Mitch the Ripper says it's what makes Halloween 78 so good. It dips into exploitation, but it's mostly a psychological thriller until it leans into being a slasher. Yeah, and it holds back on the slasher element, Is there even any, other than like Laurie's cut on her arm, is there any blood? I don't think so. Right? I don't think there's any blood other than when he cuts Laurie. Well, and him, I guess, getting stabbed in the neck with the knitting needle, but I don't even know if you see blood from there. So, yeah, I mean, for the time, certainly, Mitch, for 1978, I know that Black Christmas had been out, which isn't really that gory, but Texas Chainsaw in 74 pushes it pretty far, right? But as far as, Halloween being a bit more mainstream, being distributed by Universal, I think it was at the time, yeah, definitely would have been considered exploitative at that time. But, a good extension of Hitchcock, a good extension of something like Black Christmas, or even like Peeping Tom, which is a really damn good movie. If you guys haven't seen Peeping Tom, that is so creepy. And what a cool, I think it came out in like the mid to late 60s. And it's so, not only is it crazy to me to think about it being a slasher from that era, because no one really talks about it as being a slasher, except for in Scream 4. But, and kind of similar to Joker, which Tyler and I were talking about earlier, you start to, like, you kind of relate with the killer in Peeping Tom. Like, you feel bad for him, and you're kind of on his side, and you wish that he wasn't doing what he was doing, but he is. So a really, really interesting, kind of tilted angle on Peeping Tom. So if you haven't seen Peeping Tom, I can't recommend it enough. If you're a fan of slashers, it might be considered slow burn just because it's relatively old, but really interesting kind of psychological look, without being up its own ass. Tyler says, yeah, constantly ticking all the boxes to posture some morality and serving a 4-quadrant audience makes for bland and hollow storytelling. Man, I couldn't say it any better than that. That's awesome. Is this about the story, or do you just want a pat on the back? That's the thing, is I think, just like any sort of exclusive kind of group, which I think you can consider Hollywood exclusive in a sense. People come from Hollywood royalty, or they have enough money that they can buy their way in. They want to, it's a big old circle jerk with those people. So it's who can make, and I don't want to use the term woke because I just think it gets like overused, but who can make the most like heavy-handed, insulting to the regular everyday American kind of movie. And it's no secret to me that a lot of these movies don't do well overseas, and particularly don't do well in China. Because if you think the United States has issues with power structure and all that stuff, I think we sell other countries short, that all countries and all peoples have biases and prejudices and all that stuff. And there are a lot of our movies that don't play well in China because China doesn't like some of the stuff that we put in there. And they probably censor a lot of it out, right? I think that whole like Rose Tico thing with The Last Jedi kind of blew up in their face. And I don't want to get into it because I don't want to like mess things up, but I know there's... I don't believe the actress that played Rose Tico is of Chinese descent. She may be Korean, and I think there's a little bit of friction there. I mean, there's friction between all sorts of groups all across the world, but I think sometimes here in the States we think that we're just, we're the worst, and every country's got its problems because every country's got people, and people have problems. Tyler says it's also so often them just ruining a movie to preach to the choir. Most of us are hip and inclusive. Agreed, Tyler. And doesn't it just get annoying when you're sort of being told that you're just not good enough? It's just not good enough that you're not prejudiced. Like, what you need to be doing is walking around, and it's turned into sort of a religion. Like, I used to go to youth group, like I said earlier, I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic youth group, but I also went to a Protestant youth group because I really liked their worship service. They had like 2 guitarists and sang 3-part harmonies, and 20 kids singing 3-part harmonies. It's just, it's like moving stuff, right? But I always felt like whenever I was in the Protestant youth group, they really pushed this whole like, if you're not telling everyone about it in your life, like if you're not trying to save people and win them over, then you're lukewarm and it won't get you into heaven, basically. And I'm just I'm like, I don't agree with that. Can't blame you for trying, but I don't agree with that. And I think that's kind of like what I call it secular religionism, is sort of like, people that either, I don't think you need to like subscribe to any religion or anything. I don't think that you're like totally lost if you don't have religion, but I think there are people that replace, usually people have faith in something that's difficult or impossible to prove, and that's why it's faith, right? You're believing in something that you can't necessarily prove beyond a shadow of a doubt. When you replace that and you start having faith in like politicians and political ideas, and then it's easy to twist that into like a cult of personality, like the awesome band Living Colour sings about. Because the whole idea of cult of personality is you just fall in love with that person. Anything they say or do is just perfect to you. They can't do anything wrong. So you've basically you are a secular religionist because you're treating your secular thoughts and beliefs as doctrine. And I think that that's something that Hollywood is big on. And I think there are a lot of people in this country that are lost for various reasons. Plenty of people that are, God-fearing people or religious people that, are lost as well. But I think like a lot of the lost folks in the middle that don't have a faith like that, they fill it with something that it just isn't very positive, and it turns into what we're talking about right now, which is this whole like, it's never good enough, you're not hip or inclusive enough, I want a pat in the back, and I'm just gonna ruin this thing that could be really good and could still make a great point, but maybe do it a little more subtly. And yeah, Tyler finishes that off with, the ones who need their minds opened aren't going to respond to overt signaling. That's absolutely right. Yeah, like you're not going to win anyone over by telling them they're a big dumb dummy that's stuck in the Stone Age, right? Like that's not going to get somebody to be like, maybe I do need to treat women and people that don't look like me differently. Allie, thank you so much for heading out. Hopefully I didn't miss you leaving, but I really appreciate you coming and hanging out. You're so awesome at popping into these streams and being supportive. You've been there since the very beginning. It's really cool. I'll probably say this every time, but you first came in here when I was interviewing Vin, and that was the first time I had ever, seen or known about you within the community. But you keep on coming back. You're so supportive of so many people on social media, just really giving a leg up to people out there creating content that you're interested in. And I think that's so awesome. So hope you have a great night and an awesome rest of your weekend, and can't wait to catch up with you next time. Danny, yes, Peeping Tom is a must watch. And okay, so it's on Hulu. So maybe I'll have Kate watch it and see if she can put up with it, just because it's kind of real, huh? Like, Peeping Tom impressed me because it isn't like gory, but psychologically it feels so intense. I'm like, I've only seen it one time, but it left an impact, so I need to see it a second time for sure. But I just remember like certain parts about like what kind of gets the killer off and like why he does it. Yeah, really. And I think like an interesting thing for people to see in today's day and age, right? Because this isn't spoiling too much. I'm not going to get into too much of a spoiler on Peeping Tom, but the main character, and keep in mind, Peeping Tom was made in the 60s. The main character, his father was like a clinical psychologist or something like that, and filmed his childhood, like filmed him growing up, as like sort of made him the object of an experiment, right? So think about it, this is the 60s, right? So people didn't have like camcorders. So his father put him through this experience that was so damaging by like documenting his entire life that it ended up causing some friction psychologically for him as an adult. So I think that's like a really interesting thing that to think about in today's day and age. And and this isn't like judgment on my part. I'm not a parent, so I don't know. But certainly you see the amount that people share on social media about their children, and like I think sometimes maybe people take it a bit too far. I don't think that's like the majority, but I do think like, man, what's going to happen in 15 or 20 years when like this person's now an adult and there's all this information out there about them, pictures of them, and their whole life has been documented, and they didn't necessarily not give consent, but they were also like minors, so like they're cool with their parents taking a picture, but then they grow up and they realize like, oh my gosh, this is either it's just really embarrassing or it's just damaging in a different way. Who knows? We won't know until we're down the line that far. So yeah, we'll see. Mitch says freedom of religion is the freedom to think. Yeah, ultimately that's the root of it, right, Mitch? Um, you're absolutely right. You're bang on, as Dave McRae would say. Um, yeah, and that's the whole thing too. Again, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but it's not coming. I'm not saying it as from a place of judgment. Like, I don't think any less of somebody if they're atheist or agnostic or Muslim or Jewish or whatever. I think there's good people and bad people in every group. I don't think that belonging to a religion absolves you of being a dick, and I don't think that like being devoid of religion absolves you or saves you from being a dick. You know, it's like, yeah, it's just it's like it's like the stuff people say about police officers. Like, all cops can't really be bastards. Like, yeah, we should have a reasonable distrust of like authority, right? But we can also agree that if there's bad cops, there's got to be good police officers that do the job the right way, right? Like, I don't know. To me, the whole like absolutist sort of way of thinking is really difficult because maybe it's because I grew up watching Star Wars. I just feel like, you know, when you delve into that whole like absolutist way of thinking, it can get really hairy really quick, right? Thank you, Evil Monsterism. I love this shirt. This is my day off shirt. It is my day off shirt. I'm wearing my day off shirt because it's my day off shirt. That's right. I got it off, it was advertised to me on like Instagram or something. $30. What's really cool too is it's like that. It's not silk, but it kind of feels like the silk boxers kind of thing. So I wore this before I shed 30 pounds since last April. So especially before I lost the weight, this was like my Mac from It's Always Sunny wearing his Tommy Bahama shirt that kind of hit everything a little bit. But also when it's like 110 degrees out here in Phoenix, it's nice to wear a shirt that just breathes a little bit. It doesn't really wrinkle. Everywhere I wear this shirt, it gets me some attention. So that's kind of cool because if you couldn't tell already from me having a YouTube channel, I need attention. Give me attention. Gimme. Yeah. Every lesbian that works at Costco loves this shirt, it seems like. And then, you know, wearing it out to cons, of course, you get some attention. Actually, I met Dick Warlock at Mad Monster last year, and apparently he was like kind of shouting me down because he saw Michael on the shirt. And my wife, Kate, who's in the chat, shout out to Kate in the chat, she was like, hey, do you see who's shouting at you for you to come over there? So I had my meet cute with Dick Warlock, and it was because he shouted me down over my my sweet slasher killer shirt. And then Malik, when I was at H45 at the VIP party, that was awesome. What a fun night. That was back when I was still drinking a bit. But speaking of still drinking, Malik was a little buzzed, but like the sweetest kind of, like, this is the kind of guy that like, all right, dude, you handle your alcohol really well because he gets really friendly with everyone without getting weird. And you could tell he was just like soaking up just loving being around the fans. And so I went up to him and introduced myself. I wanted a picture with him, and he's like, you're wearing the Enemy on your shirt. And I was like, but I still have Michael, see? I was like, he's the king to me. He's my favorite, but you know, I love all the guys. So it's cool to have that representation, but it's not completely inclusive because there's no Chucky, there's no Jigsaw, there's no Pinhead. So come after me, Hollywood, because I don't have all the boxes aren't checked on this shirt. No Ghostface. Crazy. Well, and the thing too, Danny, is like, I think some people post about, it's all about finding that right balance, and I'm not trying to dog on anyone. For me, it's more like I'm curious to know what kind of, if any, what kind of effect that could have on people. But certainly, like, I think there's, you know, there are things that are worth sharing and things that aren't worth sharing. I do the same. I mean, even with my life, you know, if you guys follow me on social media, you'll know that a lot of it that I do is for the channel pretty much. And, you know, I post pictures of the cats and try to do a little bit of that because I know it's like good for the social media algorithms like it when you post real life stuff. However, I'm just like a little more private and maybe like a little more. There was a time in my life where I was posting a lot more about like random ass stuff, and I just kind of got over that phase. And I feel like I'm just sort of going back to the way I was in the 80s and 90s, which is just that you live your life, you soak up the moments while you're actually in them, you live them instead of feeling like you need to document and share everything. But again, like different strokes for different folks. It's not a judgment thing at all. It's an observation, and I've certainly not seen you overshare anything, but I've seen some posts where I'm like, man, some of this stuff is kind of embarrassing. Like, I'm glad that all the pictures of me potty training aren't on the internet. Or are they? So the thing is, evil monsterism is it is really rough, like 4 months. Okay. So if you can 4 months and maybe just 3 months, because so where in the country or where in the world do you live, evil monsterism? And if you want to tell me your actual name, I can call you by that instead, but whatever. Cause yeah, I grew up in Southeast Alaska and then I lived in Portland. So coming to Phoenix, like I'm not used to the heat, but you know, people that grew up in LA, even people that grow up in like Ohio or Michigan or Pennsylvania or North or South Carolina, you know, a lot of the country, Missouri, Kansas, like a lot of the country experiences like high heat in the summer. Even a place like Wisconsin or Minnesota that gets a lot of extreme like winter weather, it shoots, it's like a rubber band thing. It shoots right back in the summer to where they get, you know, 85, 100% humidity, which doesn't feel much different than 100 degrees at 100% humidity, really, you know, because it's the humidity that gets you. So I would say Phoenix, like 3 to 4 months, pretty rough. But everywhere has air conditioning. So your house has it, your office has it, every restaurant or shop you go into is going to have it. So it's kind of like if you live in a place that has snow, it's like, yeah, you got to deal with heating up your car. You got to deal with like scraping the windows. Here in Phoenix, it's like in the summer, you got to deal with that extreme heat. And I don't know, like right now the weather is perfect. It's been perfect since November. So that's really cool. Like to be able to go outside pretty much wearing whatever you want for, you know, and we're probably not going to see real high heat. You know, April, it starts heating up. And then by May, like my wife and I, we got married 2 Mays ago on Friday the 13th in 2022. And it was hot. It was 100 and I was sweating my balls off. But, you know, I wore a suit and we picked that day because our first date was on a Friday the 13th. So we wanted to get married on a Friday the 13th. So, yeah, we just went that route. Danny says, I love the AZ heat, but I am half Canadian. Then we crossed the border to Michigan, so I love that heat. Yeah. Yeah, because Michigan gets hot in the summer, for sure. Evil Monsterism says, Pinhead has the best voice of any horror character, in my opinion. He does have a really good voice. I love those first 2 Hellraiser movies. I even think the third Hellraiser is like kind of fun for what it is. And that first one is really, really good. And I know you don't get that much of Pinhead. He became the icon like later on. But there's just something about the practical effects of the original. And it's got that, you know, Clive Barker really hits that kind of Edgar Allan Poe kind of vibe with the like having a moral to the story sort of. And like people getting their comeuppance that are doing bad things. I liked that a lot. Yeah, I feel like a lot in the first couple movies, Pinhead, there's a lot of like, they could like totally get Kirsty, but he's like, wait. He just is like, but why? But why, Pinhead? Why are we waiting? Wait. Let's see here. Danny says, I agree, but would think carefully about what I would post. Yeah, I think, yeah, you just got to pick your spots, right? Sharing about yourself or sharing about other people. Yeah. Davey. Okay. So, Paul, you are in Michigan. All right. Call me. I'll call you Al. How about that? So, Paul, my wife's stepfather, his name is Paul, and he lives in Michigan as well. So he's in the Ann Arbor area. He is a yoga instructor out there. And my wife, she grew up in Detroit and White Lake, Michigan. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with those areas. She was born in Grosse Pointe Park. Her dad grew up in the Polish neighborhood of Hamtramck. So I try to soak up as much Michigan knowledge as I can get. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm kind of nerdy. I don't exactly have a photographic memory, but pretty dang close depending on what the topic is. But it's great that I met a super hottie from Michigan, because the Detroit Red Wings are the team that got me into hockey when I played NHL PA 93 on the Sega Genesis. I think that game is better than NHL 94. I just have more fun playing it than NHL 94. And it has the Players Association, so you get all the players' names. So I learned the players' names, fell in love with the Red Wings, but my family roots for teams from the Washington, D.C. area, so I moved over to being a Caps fan. But my dad got his master's in environmental science at U of M in Ann Arbor. So I've been rooting for the Wolverines my entire life. So world champs, baby, feels pretty good. It's been a long time coming. Proud of those guys. Not going to act like I had anything to do with it, but very happy to be a Wolverine fan for sure. You don't like how... Yeah, Danny, I can understand that, because you deal with all the extreme, the vortex, weather storms there, the lake effect, and it gets you both ways. Went from 72 to 20 degrees in 2 days. Holy crap, Paul. That's brutal. See, yeah, that's the thing, is you're not going to get that in Phoenix. And I think, people are like, oh, it's a dry heat. Not really. In the summer during monsoon season, it does get pretty humid. But really, 2019 was probably like the rainiest summer that we've had since we've been here. It really hasn't rained very much other than that. We also live in a suburb of Phoenix called Goodyear, and we're up in this little community. So we're kind of like off the beaten path. And for whatever reason, like we see rain in other spots because we can like look down into the valley. We'll see rain in other spots of the valley, and it just doesn't come up here as much. So. But I grew up in the rain. Holy crap. Juneau, Alaska, rained all friggin' time. So where are you at, Tyler? Are you in the Bay Area? Or no, you're not, because you say you miss it. So where are you at right now? Just outside of Lansing. All right, Paul. Yeah, I want to get out there for a game. I'd really like for my brothers and my dad and I to go out there go to Ann Arbor for a game. And hey, maybe check out Michigan State, since Sparty is on a bit of a low turn. You guys will come back. There was a really good period of time though where Michigan State was a good rivalry, especially when Ohio State was beating the shit out of us for more than a decade. It felt good to have a rivalry that was close, but that we could still win most of the time. Not all the time. Holy crap. All right, guys. Well, crap. It's been about 2 hours and 40 minutes. So I think we've kind of, had a great little chat about a bunch of different things. I've had an awesome time with you guys. Thank you all so much for hanging out in the chat, especially hanging out and being here for the long haul. I think it's really cool. Everybody that popped in to say what's up, really appreciate you as well. If you're watching this after the fact, feel free to comment down below and let me know your thoughts on the Halloween TV series. Let me know what you think of my silly little pitch for the anthology series. And yeah, if you guys want to see a video that's a little more concise and just more about those ideas, I can certainly shoot something together that's pre-recorded where I edit my, thoughts together in more of a concise nature. If you guys want something like that, let me know in the comments below. Please hit the like button on your way out. And if you're not subscribed, click that one as well. Trying to hit 400 subs before the end of the month. And really, my goal is like 1,000 subs before the end of the year. I know that's pretty lofty, but I'd rather set like a really high goal and come up short than set something low and beat it. And then, just I'd rather like leave something to work for. You know what I mean? Thank you so much, Danny. Glad you had a great time. Oh, so you moved from the Bay area to Sacto. You're not too far though, right? You're just about a hour and a half away from the city if you want to get out there. I've spent some time in Sacramento playing music. So I think they called it the Colony or the Cafe Colonial and Luigi's. Really like playing Sacramento. Love the people in Sacramento and the punk rock scene out there. Very supportive, really cool town. Only been there for quick visits, but always had a really great time. Take care, Paul. We'll see you in the next Dave chat, huh? All right, guys. Well, until next time, I've been and will continue to be Davey Deathray. Take care.